Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It is Thursday, October 6th. My mic is on. So is my mask. It is Thursday, October 6th. Remind you that we are being recorded tonight by WCTV and audio notes by Jamie Wixton. Would everyone please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Chairman, I'm not getting any audio. Can you host? Test, no audio? No audio for the moment, just a minute. Okay, just a minute, please. Just let me know, Bob. Yes. Try it again. Test. Can you hear me now? I can't hear you here. Can you hear me out there?
Yes. Yep. Bob, can you hear my mic?
Oh, yes, we can.
Not that I need one.
Proceed, Mr. Chairman, but I can't guarantee that we've got audio going live.
You want to share? Maybe it could be.
Were you able to hear out of my mic, Bob? He's saying it's not being heard live on streaming.
Stream is not being heard live?
Yes, we have our mics. He said
Okay,
just proceed.
so we're just going to begin, Bob, is that correct?
Yes, go ahead, Mr.
Okay, people can read my lips. We would like to start tonight with a recognition of a longtime educator in Wareham who recently passed away, Mr. Fred Medina. He began his career in Wareham, I believe in the early 50s, as a science teacher. He became an assistant principal at the intermediate school, and I remember him as my principal when he became principal at the intermediate school as well. He was just a good man, and ask for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. We have public participation up next on the agenda. Is there anyone that would like to address the committee? Okay, seeing none, we will go to good news. Would anyone like to offer good news? Joyce?
I just want to say that I've read so many things about events that are happening at the elementary and the middle school. It's just really exciting to see everybody getting back into the swing, being able to do things like having the holiday fair and the pumpkin walk and dances at the middle school. I also want to say congratulations to Cliff Sylvia on the dedication of the school store. What a great honor for a great man. Not only, you know, he had such a great impact in Wareham, not just as a teacher, but as a school committee member, and I was really happy to see that. And also, I was asked by the Booster Club, so we are having a hard time recruiting new parents. So I'm just putting it out there. The president of the Booster Club asked me to put it out there. I said, well, I don't know how many people actually watch the school committee meetings, but just to let everyone know that we are hoping to get new parents to join in the fun at the Booster Club. All right, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Schwam.
Yes, good evening. I just wanted to share that I was fortunate to be accepted into the Ready Foundation Learning Series, which is race, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I went to my first meeting this week in Marlborough with 51 other leaders across Massachusetts. And the presenters were Lee Title and Danesha Amante Jackson. They are both Harvard educated. One's a Harvard professor, and they were fantastic. We'll be meeting 3 more times, and then there'll be a project that will be done as a result of this. But one of the things that was so compelling to me was to have the ABCD of how you become more or less, more diverse, more inclusive, right? And less of the opposite of that. And the A is academics. And I was so happy that that was the A, because there's so much inequity in how we present education to our students. And I've been on that path for 25 years, and we have got to do something about it everywhere. So, and then the second, B is belonging. C is commitment to dismantling, and D, diversity. So I just thought I would share that, and I will keep you updated.
Thank you. Did I see, Indiana, that you were a governor? Is that correct? Someone say congratulations for Boise State. Was that correct?
Yeah, you heard right. The Massachusetts Boise State governor is president.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we have our student representative report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And, you know, I was talking to some students the other day about how I think this is the busiest October in the past 5 years I've been at Wareham High School. And maybe it's just coming back or whatever it is, but it's a busy one and we have a lot going on. So I'm here to fill everyone in all about it. Spirit Week is coming up in just a couple of weeks, so that's October 17th to October 21st. And we have some really cool days. New this year, a formal professional day on Thursday, and I know we're really excited about that, so that'll be fun. Pep Rally is on the Friday of Spirit Week, and then that weekend, the next Saturday, or that Saturday right after Pep Rally is homecoming. So along with the homecoming football game too. So that'll be really fun. And yeah, I'll report back to you on how that goes. We're also doing a can drive. So last year, the can drive was, it had so much participation, mainly because the juniors and seniors battling it out. But we got thousands, like actual thousands of canned goods and non-perishable foods for Damien's Food Pantry. So the class can drive battle is coming back this year, so that'll be exciting as well. And as you were saying, the dedication ceremony to Dr. Sylvia for the school store, I was there along with a bunch of people from Plymouth County Teachers Federal Credit Union and their CEO, awesome people over there. We're very lucky to have them in the school. A bunch of DECA students were there, and we got to meet all these people, a bunch of members from the Sylvia family who are just amazing people and long, deep history in Wareham, and in DECA too. So that was really awesome. So a huge thank you to PCT and the Cape Cod Canal Regional Chamber of Commerce for helping with that event. National Honor Society had its first meeting. Our induction is going to be this fall, and I have to shout out Mrs. Medina and Ms. Tarasconi for taking that over this year. We kind of didn't have an advisor at the beginning of the year, and they both stepped in with all that they do and stepped in to take that over. So huge thank you to them. Tons of plans for Honor Society already. Thanksgiving baskets, adopt a family during Christmas time, a voter registration drive this year, so that's really exciting, and tons more there. DECA has a busy month ahead of them. We're traveling to Pins for our annual team building event. We'll be hosting a craft fair in November, a musical bingo fundraiser on October 19th, and we're planning our annual cash calendar fundraiser, so if any of those sound of interest to anyone, let me know. I attended the Southeast Regional Student Advisory Council meeting this past week along with Mariam Karam and Olivia Hogan, who are both on that council. And those meetings are so awesome, and I happen to be elected as the work group chair for the School Spirit and Culture work group. So we're already doing awesome work. We already did some awesome work at that meeting, and I'm super excited to bring that to our school and the other schools in our region as well. So that's great news. The All Cape College Fair is happening on October 19th. Lots of students are already signed up. We've moved all sports from that day to allow students to go, and guidance is super excited for that. IB is having their 5-year diploma program review this year, and parts of our IB class were recorded, which was a little weird at first, but then we got used to being recorded in our Theory of Knowledge class, and then some students participated in a virtual evaluation with members from the IB team a couple of weeks ago, so thank you to Mrs. Yates for involving us on that. And last but not least, the Massachusetts Association of Student Reps, I have to give a little piece of information from them. They are holding their annual Delegates Assembly Conference on Saturday, October 15th in Marlborough, and I'll be helping run that conference as a member of their board, but we have a really good number of students already signed up for that from tons of other school districts. But if anyone happens to know any members of other school committees or student representatives, please let them know about this opportunity. I can give you any of you more information about it if you need it, but it's a great opportunity, and that's all I got.
Thank you, Indiana.
Thanks, Ian.
All right, move on to principal reports, and it looks like Dr. Chandler, you're up first.
My key's on, I just left school. Am I on? Can you hear me? Yeah. Good evening, school committee. So excited to report again on Wareham Elementary. We are in full gear. We have our enrollment, 923 students right now for enrollment. One of our goals this year at Wareham Elementary, it's one of my principal goals, is checking attendance, student attendance. So I thought I'd give you that report. And we are at 95% student attendance, the average of all of our days in school. We've had about 875 students each and every day, which attributes to 95%. And we are, just working away. We're excited for tomorrow. We have an exciting professional development day where our teachers are able to select from a course catalog this year that Dr. Schwam and others put together. Very exciting, many of which are hosted from our own Wareham Public School, from our school at Wareham Elementary. I'm taking the Empowering Writers. So Empowering Writers is coming to our district this year for grades 2 through 8. Right, Dr. Schwam?
2 through 4.
In my school, in our school.
2, 3, 4.
2, 3, 4. And we're excited because when I was a 5th grade teacher, I taught Empowering Writers. I thought it was very engaging, gave the students a lot of tools to be able to begin their writing, gave them a lot of craft to their work. So I'm very excited for that for tomorrow. Today we had our kindergarten showcase. It's happening right now at Wareham Elementary School, where 184 students and their families are going through kindergarten and showcasing all of their work. That's what they called it this year, a kindergarten showcase. And later on this month, we have, of course, our famous picture day on October 24th, where everybody gets all dressed up. And exciting, our October 26th, we're having our pumpkin story walk, and that is really, really fun. What we're doing this year, because another one of our goals is writing, for the earlier grades, they're going to decorate their pumpkin with a character and bring the book in. But for our grades 2, 3, 4, I'm asking to write a story, at least 5 sentences or more about the pumpkin. So we're going to walk all around to the cafeteria, possibly outside. It's going to be a good time. So I welcome you to that school committee and anyone listening.
What day is that on?
It is October 26th.
Okay.
It's a Wednesday, I believe. It's from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And what's exciting this year for all 3 schools on that week is we're all having fun. I do believe the high school is the next night. Mr. Palladino is hosting. Talk about that for our students as well. At this time, I'll take questions.
You had mentioned attendance, and 95% obviously is a good average. At what point do you start reaching out to parents for the concerns of students? Like, what number is the magic number, or is there one?
Yes, there is. And, well, I'd like to start with like 5, beginning. I really want to really make a difference this year. Because what happened during COVID, we didn't have a lot of control over it, but this year we do. And as we know, results show it. All of the research shows that if you're in school, you're doing well, your academics improve. It's really important to be in school each and every day. So we're going to start with 5, making phone calls, starting with the teachers first. We do have attendance officers, 2 of which that will also follow up. We are, just recently today, Mr. Taviano did some research for me as well, and found that we may craft our attendance letters a little bit differently based on some research that shows once we, hit that mark where we send those attendance letters home, in the way in which we word those attendance letters really may make a difference as well for our families. But it is important for us to be at school each and every day. Not only is it the law, but more importantly, it's for the students. It's our job to be there each and every day.
Agreed. Thank you.
I just had a question. You said that the average attendance is 95%. Do you have like a goal percentage? I mean, I'm assuming 100 obviously would be ideal,
I was gonna
but
say 100. Yeah, I'd like to do 100. I mean, the state's thinking, 90%, so no more than 18 days. But even 18 days is too much, really too much. So I like 95. I think 95 is a solid goal for us and very attainable.
okay.
Thank you. April.
Are you still seeing numbers trickling in for registration for like kindergarten and preschool, or are your numbers pretty much settled as
We've
of
settled
now?
down.
Okay.
We've settled down. But interestingly enough, we did have, we went from, like I said, in kindergarten especially, an enrollment of 119 to 180, I think we're at 185 or so.
Wow.
So it's quite an enrollment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chandler.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Tracy Cody. Cote. Hi.
Hello.
All right, we were up to still a great start at Wareham Middle School. Clubs began last week. This Tuesday, and we have some clubs that met today as well. Kids are very excited about that beginning. We are halfway through term 1. I know you can't believe it, but we handed out progress reports last week. Our enrollment is steady at 445 right now. Questions, concerns?
When you say clubs meet, when do they meet?
They're meeting Tuesdays after school, and some are meeting on Thursdays after school.
Okay.
Yep. So
I'm just asking, I wasn't sure if they were able to meet during the day, so they're not. So after school, so rides are, yeah.
They don't have rides home.
Mm-hmm.
But we had, quite a few students starting. Intramurals start next Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
We already have about, I think, 50 to 60 students signed up for
Oh,
that. So,
good.
yeah, so they're
That's
signing
great.
up and they're getting rides with each other, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Did you do intramurals last year?
we did.
Oh, you did, okay.
But, we started clubs late last year. We didn't have all our clubs running, so.
Mm-hmm. All right, good.
April?
Just to kind of piggyback off of Dr. Chandler, congratulations again on the whole promotion to doctor. It's taken me a minute to still get used to it. How are you finding attendance so far this year?
Terrible.
So have
Really?
have you had a comment?
After 2 days out in a row. I send out letters soon, some of them not so nice letters.
Do you hear a common theme as to why? Is it illness and fall? Is it transportation?
There's a lot of excuses, it's not transportation.
Is it all grades, or is there a couple grades? So I'm assuming this is going to be an area of focus for you going forward.
Employees in the
Yeah.
area of focus, but yes, it's really hard to educate children when they're not in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, COVID's one thing, but it's really hard to educate children that aren't sitting in front of you.
Is there anything that we can do to help?
Spread the word. We really need kids to come to school. It's important. We were just out for 2 months. Vacations aren't important right now. We're coming off a pandemic. It's 180 days. We just need kids in front of us. And we need, and if there's issues why they're not coming, we're here to help. So our counselors are calling daily. We're already filing CRAs. We just need kids at school.
Can you keep us informed with the percentage, next report in a month from now, like what the percentage will have been up to that point?
Sure, I mean, what percentage do you want? Like, I can tell you 93% came to school today, but that doesn't mean a hill of beans. Like, how many have already reached the 10%? A lot.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've only been in school 25 days.
Right.
I think if you want to give us some criteria, I can certainly present on that criteria.
Okay.
It's hard because
Right.
attendance is changing. Like, write notes for everything. So we get a lot of doctor's note, and once they write the doctor's note, we can't do anything, you know? But yeah, I
Okay.
have all the numbers, but it's a constant, ever-changing game.
Jeff?
I assume you've talked to, lots of parents and guardians, et cetera. What is the normal reaction, and do they understand the correlation between attendance and doing well?
I don't know. I don't know that they understand that correlation. We get a lot of excuses.
I'm extremely sympathetic. I
Yeah.
understand how difficult this is.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming that the parents and guardians want their children to do well in school.
Oh, I definitely assume that as well. But there's varying reasons for why their child can't get to school.
I understand. But I still think ultimately parents and guardians are in control. And if they realize that they're risking their children's not only education but success in life, and maybe we'll have to prove it to them. I'm serious about that, but
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
for
I
another.
think
That's for another day.
I think my progress reports for term 1 prove that already. I mean, you miss one day of school and you're already behind, you know, so.
April?
So with that, I know that it's frustrating for you as an educator because you want the kids in front of you, and obviously everyone has excuses in life in general. I get that's frustrating. Do you feel that if they understood the weight of that those dates are required and that their kids may be held back, is retention even like a flicker in some of these parents' heads that their child may not be able to meet the benchmarks to be promoted and then have to repeat again the same grade? Or do you feel that that is something that parents aren't even thinking about?
I think they're thinking about it once we're calling. And I send letters, we call, we file in court. So even if it's excused, I send letters home, please, begging parents to come in, talk to us. Let's make a plan. What can we do to help? So, I mean, it's always been an issue, but the issue since the pandemic is just huge. Huge. And I think it's probably systemic. It's year after year that it's an issue. So, we're working on it.
I just want to say,
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier, what kind of number do you want? I don't want you to feel that we're putting you on the spot for a certain number. I just want to know,
Yeah.
what can we do that?
No. Yeah, absolutely. That's not what I was asking. I'm just saying you can present the attendance data in varying ways. I think if we were all consistent, at least you could get a clearer picture on how that is. Like, I can tell you I had 93% attendance today. That sounds great. But for the week, it wasn't really good. For the month, it really wasn't good. So maybe,
We can come up with a template or something.
the state looks at 10%. So maybe every time we present, we can tell you how many kids have already reached the 10% out of how many days we've attended. Do you know what I mean? So out of 25 days, how many have already missed that 10%? That's huge. So when you look at attendance at the beginning of the year, the number 2 is huge. When I look at attendance in January, the number 2 isn't huge. So it all depends on how we look at the data. So what I'm saying, at least for school committee and for the superintendent, it might be important to ask us all the same question about data. And what would that question be? What information would be helpful to know every month? Yeah.
Would it be possible to look at a subsection of excused versus unexcused?
Yeah, I mean, we can pull that data as well.
A lot of parents feel that like an excused absence means it's okay because it's not hurting them because they're allowed a certain number of excuse. Like, I know that me personally as a parent, I'm like, well, if you don't have a doctor's note, like you didn't go to the doctor but you still felt crappy and you said, home, like, you know that that's not an excused absence. When I start getting those letters that you might have, no credit towards it, and I feel like that's on you. You know
Right,
what I mean?
right.
I think it would be helpful to understand like what, or even if it's the same
Yeah.
anything, you know,
Mhm.
that's not helping either. So trying to, you know, even if it's local or getting the word out, that just writing a note to write a note isn't helping anybody
Right, yeah.
either.
We can definitely pull that data. So in Power School, you can pull excused, unexcused, you can, so it's easy enough. We pull, my staff, we pull those reports daily.
Thank you.
Just have one more.
Sure.
With the parents that you sent notes to, have you seen any improvement or react? I mean, does it seem like those letters are effective?
Sometimes we're getting ready to send the letters out, so it's halfway between the term. I send them out at midterm and at the end of the term. Quite honestly, many people get very angry at us for calling. So the counselors are calling right now, you know, your child's already missed 5 days of school, what can we do to help? And they're not necessarily used to getting the calls, so they're a little upset with us. But it's not meant to be harmful, it's just meant to be, we really want your child here, and we really can't educate them the way we need to in the 180 days if they're not present. So,
All right, we'll follow up. Thank you.
all right, thank you.
Mr. Palladino.
Mr. Chair, Kevin, while he's making his way up, can I just say that to go along with what Ms. Cote said about which data do we want, and she'll, maybe if they're taking their time, I don't want to make any more work for the principals, but they're obviously already taking their time to prepare to come here once a month to present to us. If we could have just their little short report in writing, it would be helpful, I think. Again, not looking to create any more work for any of you, but I mean, you're already doing work to come here. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
All right, well, thanks for having me. We had a great month of September. We had our annual open house on September 15th, and I felt it was well attended. Parents followed their child's schedule and had an opportunity to meet each teacher and learn about the course and the class expectations. From, as was mentioned by Indy, from September 19th to 21st, we had our IB Diploma Program evaluation visit. Certainly want to thank all those involved, including school committee members. I think it was a great event. We got a lot of good feedback, and we anticipate a really positive report in a few weeks. All of our students have been trained in the Alice lockdown program, and we conducted our first safety drill on Tuesday, September 20th. Thursday, the 29th, was our picture day. And this week marks the start of our enrichment days, which are conducted on Wednesday and Thursdays during advisory period. During this time, a student can sign up for extra support with the teacher. Students have the choice. And it's been a really great 2 days with our students involved in that. And we will do that again next week. As Indiana and Joyce mentioned, we named the school store after Cliff Sylvia, who is the founding teacher of the DECA program. So it was something school committee approved before the COVID pandemic, and we finally were allowed to have people in the building this year, so it was a great event. And I couldn't believe it, but he had no clue it was going to happen. So that was really the best part. And as I think Indy mentioned, his family, all his kids were there. His wife eventually showed up. She was there. It was tough for her to get him out of the house and to get her into the building. But we had everyone there at the end, which is all that matters. And I know all of you know Cliff, and just a great person. And, you know, just it was great for him to get that program started. And it's obviously one of our biggest programs in the school.
Are you telling me he was speechless?
Cliff is never speechless. We made him give a speech.
Yeah, okay. I just
Your old
wondered.
neighbor's never speechless. You know that. So just some announcements, if I could, on some really important events happening. And next Wednesday, we have our Mifa Financial Aid Night, and we're opening this up to everyone, specifically targeting juniors and seniors. Financial aid has changed so much over the years, and the process of applying has changed. It's really important that parents attend this event. We have math teachers giving extra credit for students showing up. I've donated a raffle for the students to come in. We've encouraged every student. We publicize it everywhere. Certainly want to have a packed audience in the auditorium. And again, that's Wednesday the 9th, next Wednesday, and it's at 6 p.m. Wednesday the 19th, as Indy mentioned, is the All Cape College Day. I had an opportunity to go down and check this out a few years ago before the pandemic, and was amazed by how many admissions reps are there for our students to meet with. It's a gym 6 times the size of the high school gym, and just about every square foot is filled with an admissions rep or a student looking to talk to that admissions rep. So it's a great event. We've shut down all activities until 6:30 on that day, so everyone is encouraged. We have a bus with 25 students currently signed up to be on that bus. We anticipate filling that bus, and again, it's 3:30 to 5:30, Barnstable High School, 2 weeks from yesterday. As was mentioned previously, we have our Haunted Hallway event is coming back. We did it for 1 year in 2019, and we're really excited to have that back. It's Thursday, October 27th, from 5 to 7 p.m. It's free, and we encourage all Wareham students, pre-K through whatever, 10th grade, 12th grade, whatever's appropriate, to attend. And we'll have high school students working the event as well. And we're really looking forward to that. It was an amazing event, like I said, in 2019, and we hope to replicate that again. As was mentioned, clubs and after-school activities and sports are in full swing. Tomorrow is our in-service, and we are spending the whole day at the high school training and preparing for our NEAS visit, which will be November 13th through 16th. This is our decennial visit. And as Tracy mentioned, we're halfway through term 1. Currently, we have 635 students enrolled at Wareham High School. Our attendance rate for September was 93.4%. And, you know, everything kind of Tracy said we do at the high school for attendance, where September's kind of a tough month because you're still trying to figure out, there's a handful of kids that have transferred but are still in your roles but haven't attended, especially the first couple weeks of September. So traditionally, our September attendance is down a little bit lower than October, November, et cetera. Certainly entertain any questions you might have.
April?
Hi. How are you finding I know similar to Tracy, are you finding it's like a lot of excuses, or you think some of it is more of an enrollment, or if it's still like kind of that like lag, people are taking late vacations because of COVID postponements, things like that? Or are you finding that, because I know especially as they get to the upper levels with high school and kids start to get more independent, they're more making the decisions at this level than with Tracy and Bethany's kids, where it's more of a parent choice. How are you finding that this year so far?
Well, you know, DESE doesn't differentiate between excused or unexcused. You're either in school or you're not in school. Now, we have a mechanism to make sure students are accountable, and we have a credit pending and a no credit policy. So where students have to accrue credits in high school, I think we have a little more leverage than maybe the other schools at getting kids in and holding them accountable. So we have a policy where if they miss 4 classes in a term, they lose credit for that term. And if they maintain for the next 3 terms, then credit is reissued at the end of the year. If they have 2 terms with no credit, they lose credit, and they have to do a remediation program over the summer. So it gives us a little bit, like I said, a little bit more leverage. It really, you know, it's interesting. It's 5% of the population that really drives the numbers, and it's unfortunate. And there are 5% that, for the most part, are dealing with all kinds of issues that prevent them from coming to school. But the issue is those 5% bring down our attendance 1% every single day. So we're starting at 99% with those 5% dealing with their hospitalizations, whatever they may be. Now, we excuse them, so we know where they are, they're accounted for. But as far as we're concerned, as far as DESE's concerned, we walk into the building with best case scenario being 99% if everyone's there. So it's a little bit frustrating, but it's not unusual. And speaking with other principals, they're dealing with the same issues. You know, anytime a kid is tested positive, they have to miss 5 days. And, you know, the parents saying, I would have sent him in with a runny nose pre-2020 all day long, but I now have to keep him off for 5 days. So it's something we're dealing with. I think as a district, we do a great job of tracking and dealing with it. I can tell you, like, I know who the kids coming from the middle school are with attendance issues. Sometimes there's even, as Tracy mentioned, a CRA that's already been filed. Like this past Wednesday, one of my deans went to court on a student that they filed a CRA on last year that we're continuing on with in court. So there's really, I think, a pretty seamless transition from 7th grade to 8th grade, and I can tell you, you know, that wasn't always the case, and when you start digging deep on some of these kids with attendance issues, it stemmed back all the way to kindergarten. But what's great about the district now is we're focusing on that at a very early age to try and stem that tide. And we're doing some good things. It's still a work in progress, though.
Thank you.
I heard from a pretty good source that IB is now working jointly with NEASC. And I wondered exactly how that joint effort worked.
That's news to me. IB,
Yeah, so the next visit? The next evaluation in 5 years, IB will be partnering with NEASC. So they're going to partner up and join forces to do an evaluation of those schools that want both collectively.
But it's not going to, the principal of the high school won't feel it for 5 years.
Right.
Okay.
It's the next visit.
well, our next visit will be 10 years.
NEASC is 10 years.
Well, yeah, but IB is 5, so I
He might be
guess,
5, but NEAS won't be here in 5 years.
I don't know about that. We'll have to
I've been
see.
a chair on several visits. It's
NEASC loves
10
IB.
years,
so-
and, but it makes sense, but I haven't heard that officially that it pertains to Wareham High School.
I jumped the gun a little bit.
Well, it's funny because the whole process is so similar.
Similar.
It's like, this time, the IB visit was virtually, which I've done virtual NEAS visits myself, and I've done on-land visits as well. So I assume the next one will be in person on land. And it makes sense that they join forces because some of it is redundancy in the process.
Well, NEASC appreciates any school that's chosen to participate in IB a lot, and they'll note that, they've noted it in our reports, and they'll note it in other reports for other schools who also choose IB, because it's pedagogy. It's about how we teach as much as it is about what we teach, and that's what everyone wants everybody to do, is to reach and inspire our kids.
So, I mean, it was mentioned, I think, about 34 times in our collaborative conference
Yes.
report. So it all makes sense that eventually they would join forces and be a little more efficient.
Thanks.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Ms. Fondulis.
It's on, I can see the light, yep.
So I'm here to talk about the Wareham Cooperative Alternative Night School Program. A little different than what you heard. I have 36 students. Presently, we have 8 staff members. We have a site coordinator. We have a security. We have a counselor. And we have a secretary. And we are housed over at the high school now in the evenings, which has worked out very well. A couple of good things that have happened that are new to the night school is Adopt a Classroom reached out to me back in the summer that they wanted to adopt the co-op. So 6 teachers received $500 for supplies because we have a very small budget. So, and that's sponsored by the Atlantic Subaru, I think, Born, Picasso. So they called me the other day because they also have some stuff they want to drop off, and I said, I'm confused because I thought that the night school, they were going to order through this catalog, the supplies. And they said, no, we've got a bunch of stuff. And they started describing the stuff, and I said, well, that sounds more like elementary. They had like birdhouses and all these kind of things. So now they're going to come on the 17th, the first day that care starts at the elementary school, and they're going to donate all of these supplies to our after-school program as well. So that's exciting. And then we secured the financial literacy grant through DESE, and I was able to contract out and get an 18-week project-based financial literacy curriculum created for night school students. We just rolled it out this semester. And we eventually are going to require that every night school student take this course to get their diploma. And we have approximately 13 students set to graduate in June if they stay on the right path. So that's where we are right now with night school.
Out of the 36 students that are enrolled right now, how many are from out of district?
4.
4. Thank you.
4. We also have, we have a very eclectic group. We have 2 teen moms, so we have our teen mom group going with our outreach coordinator that gives them all the resources they need. Yep.
Good. Any questions? Jeff? Oh,
I was just going to ask the 36, so how does that compare to the last couple of years? Is that higher?
We're increasing, our numbers are going up because you have to understand, when we shut down with COVID, night school also shut down an additional year. We couldn't come back because we were here in this building,
Oh, right.
and we couldn't social distance, and we couldn't, it was just not possible. So unfortunately, our numbers dropped, and some of our kids aged out, because we can only go to the age 21.
Oh.
So some of our students had to take the route of the GED, but they did. But now with our counselor, we're doing a lot of outreach, reaching back to our kids, trying to get them to come back. We already have like several emails and phone calls with families looking for the next semester in January. Because it is an alternative pathway for a lot of students, that traditional school is just not what they're cut out to do.
And we take it for granted, but it doesn't exist in every district, so.
Yeah, this is, that's why we get the school choice. What we do is we send brochures every semester to the guidance and let them know, because the closest program, I think, is New Bedford. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff?
So these are considered school choice students and we're compensated accordingly?
The ones that, we have school
30
choice.
The 32 out of 36?
Yes, but also we have students who come from the high school during day, they're staying in the day school program, but let's say they are short a course in order to graduate. So they come to the night school and take that course and they pay for it. So we raise funds that way too.
But you have 32 school choice students?
No, I have 32 students that are full-time, 4 of which are school choice. The 36, there are 4 in the day school program.
And how many are from outside of Wareham?
4.
So we're compensated for 4?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No?
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a pilot running club proposal.
Hello.
Hello.
So our clubs began, and Dr. Wade would like to do a running club, which she has done previously as part of different clubs, but we've never officially had a running club on the books. So we have to present any new pilot programs. Not really a pilot program, but we would like to make it an official club at the middle school. Many of our students, I can't remember how many you had last year, but on Tuesdays we see them running throughout the campus, and it really gets them excited.
So again, this would happen once a week right now, is the idea?
Yeah,
Tuesdays.
we do meet once a week, officially. I offer, I'm a runner, and I model the behavior that I want to see out of them. So I do offer other times that they can meet up and run. Sometimes it'll be like, okay, well, I'm running at the track on Saturday morning. If you want to show up and your parent brings you, and your parent stays, sure, let's go run. So.
Sometimes she gets them excited about joining certain races.
Yeah, they've done 5Ks with me. Before, this has never been like a real official program, but about, I don't know, 6 years ago, we had a huge group of kids, and they actually turned into the first triathlon group that came out of Wareham Middle School. And we were in July up in Boston, and they ran a triathlon, and I coach them, but the parents really are the ones who bring them and negotiate that piece of it. But I've gotten grants. I handed out about 20 pairs of sneakers a few years ago. I just try to do whatever I can to promote running, because I think it's good for your mind, good for your soul, and I think it's a good feeder program for the high school.
No, I think it's a great idea, and maybe to even get to be a cross-country team someday at the high school again would be great.
I was very disappointed when that was removed from our high school program, because I felt like that was a very inexpensive program that,
Right, just got to get the numbers back up again, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but, so I think it's a good idea. Any other questions or concerns from the rest of the committee? We will need a vote on this. April, question?
Not so much a question or a concern, but I can definitely attest to Dr. Wade's passion in this, and having seen her, run with the kids. I know that my son, when he was in the middle school, had done some of the running with her, even though now he won't admit to ever running and he does it in jeans. But I definitely know that this is something that she's amazingly supportive at, and I think that it would be a huge benefit to the kids and to the adults.
Indiana?
And I have to throw this in. I'm part of that group that became the first triathlon team, and still when I run to this day, I think of some of the things. I can hear her voice in my head telling me I can, I will, I must. And every time I run, I think of it in my head. And Dr. Wade just ran the Berlin Marathon. She is excellent. So,
Oh, thanks.
So do I have a motion on the floor to accept this pilot running club?
I'll be happy to make a motion, but after a second, I just have one final question.
Absolutely, okay.
Motion.
Motion made.
Second.
Seconded, and
What would you expect your initial enrollment membership to be?
Okay, so it's like all these kids come out and want to run until they figure out they have to run.
That is
So
true.
the numbers are really high, and then they scale back. And, I
a good group, like 20, 25 that
yeah,
end
we
up
do
staying.
have a good
Yeah.
group, but I have different days too. Like some weeks I'll do like, hey guys, it's gonna be a long run this week, so if you don't like the long run week, and that's for life, right?
What's a long run?
A long run for these kids is working up to 5K. So many of them and their parents have joined to do 5K, community 5Ks, and we talk about giving back to the community and how 5Ks, are ways to raise money for communities, and I would love for Wareham to create one. Again, we had one a long time ago. Yeah.
thank you. All right, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 500.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
We appreciate it.
All right, we have a student advisory report next.
Hello.
Hello. I want to introduce Gisela Priestley. She's a member of the Student Advisory Council at Wareham High School, representing the junior class. And our students are very active, as you can understand, and she's here representing all of these students involved in the student advisory program. She's going to give a brief presentation and certainly will entertain any questions, but I know she's going to update you on some of the things we're working on. It's real early in the school year. We've only been able to meet once because I scheduled a lockdown on the other advisory time we were going to meet. So we're just getting some things started, but I think you'll be excited to hear what we've got going with one meeting.
Yes. So with our previous meeting, we talked about keeping the Wareham High School library open after school hours. There were some problems this school year and part of school year, last school year, of the police being called on students at the public library. And I realized that most students didn't feel comfortable going back to that library, understandably, but students have to have a place to go after school hours. There's lots of students, specifically who have single parents or don't live in Wareham, who have parents who are working and they have to stay after school. And I think it's a great place to have, it's a great community gathering place. And I think students need a place where they feel comfortable. And it's mostly students of color and low-income students who have to go to the library after school to get the work they need to be done. So we talked about keeping the library open till around 3:50, we said, on for one day first to see how many people would come. And yeah, that's one thing we've thought about, and we're very excited about that. We've even talked to National Honor Society to see if they would want to come tutor students in the library after school, because they tutor students in the cafeteria, and there's not always the biggest turnout, but in the library, at the public library, there's at least always 30 students there after school, and I think those numbers would definitely reflect at the high school library. So that was one thing we talked about. Another thing we talked about was the dress code. Lots of students feel very passionate about the dress code, and we gave out a survey last year at a kind of awkward time, right when seniors were leaving and when everyone's brain was halfway out the door. And we got around a fifth of the school's response. And we are going to send out that survey again this school year when we have the entire senior and through 8th grade class there, and asking people's opinions. And last year, people were very vocal about how frustrated they were, specifically on bandanas. Lots of students of color specifically have been talking about how they don't feel comfortable with teachers commenting, saying that they're not allowed to wear bandanas because they are affiliated with gangs. But I feel like in our dress code, we're missing the cultural aspect of bandanas. For instance, there was the Cape Verdean St. John's. They have it every summer. And last year when we were talking about this, all on the walls, I started looking because I was thinking about this, and I realized that there's photos and paintings all over the room of women with bandanas, and it's just, I feel like a lot of students have talked to me personally about how they don't feel comfortable with teachers, specifically white teachers, talking about why they shouldn't wear such a cultural item, especially in Wareham. And if we're talking about gangs, I feel like gangs are created because people need a community that is going to support them, and singling out students when they need support is not something we should be doing. If anything, I think we should be allocating resources to make sure students have what they need so they don't need to be in a gang before we talk about why gangs are just irrelevant. So, yeah, that's...
So more to come on that survey. This is in anticipation of being here in the spring with our handbook, possibly making some tweaks to our dress code. Nothing that's going to be in place certainly in the fall.
Giselle, what year are you right now at the high school?
I'm in my junior year.
Junior year, okay.
Question?
Dr. Schwam?
Yeah, are you aware of the new policy about hair?
No, I'm not.
Yes, so there's a new policy that just passed. Yes, and you should probably get a copy of that because it is precisely for the purposes that you're describing. It protects different cultures and what they're choosing to do with their hair. And so clearly it's been a problem because they felt the need to create a policy to address it. So take a look.
I will.
All right,
Thank you.
cool.
Brennan?
You had said that there was problems at the public library.
Yes.
Can you kind of go into detail? Why don't the students feel comfortable going there anymore? Because that's a community resource, and I mean, it might not be necessarily under our purview to do something about it, but I'd still like to know if there's a problem going on at the library that, as a citizen of this town and as a parent of this town, I'd like to know about it so I can do something about it. So what happened?
So yeah, that's a great question. So when I was at the library a couple weeks ago, I walked into the library. My grandmother came with me. There were students sitting in the library on their phones, and after my grandmother left, around 10 minutes later, the librarian yelled, "If you guys don't get out now, I'll call the police." And it was raining, and I called the library after to see why they kicked so many students out. And apparently this is the third time within the first 2 weeks of school when this happened, that police had been called on students. Mostly it was 8th graders who were kind of being inappropriate, running around in the library, which I agree is not okay. But she kicked out 20 other students who were on their phones. My grandmother thought they were in a meeting, they were so quiet. But it was mostly low-income students that I know that are in my classes that are good students that aren't doing this. It's mostly 8th graders that I recognized, and mostly people of color, and the police were called on them. I called the police to see if there was any policy regarding this. They said it's a public library, so they can call the police on whoever they want. But I talked to those students after. They don't feel comfortable, but there isn't many other places within walking distance that students can go, and it's gonna get cold, and so, yeah.
I think a few bad apples ruined it for a lot of really good kids, and it's unfortunate. Back when they had a budget, they used to have a security guard that would handle those things. Obviously, I'm sure that's been cut, but it's just a great resource for our students. It's in close proximity, and unfortunately, a couple kids ruined it for probably 3 dozen serious kids.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I'm a alumni of Wareham High School, and I remember we used to go to the library after school, middle school and everything, and the only thing I can say to you is it happened to us too.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in honor society. I was a quote-unquote good kid. Me and my friends would go there, but if any kids were causing problems, it was kind of like, get everyone out.
Yeah.
So please just, I'm hoping you don't feel that you were singled out because of any other issues. That's just kind of the way they've been doing it for a while. Not to put anything bad on the library, but I think that's just kind of their policies. If it's one, get rid of all of them. But thank you for letting us know that, and I'm glad that you guys still have the opportunity to use the high school library, and hopefully maybe we can, have some talks, have you guys talk with the library and maybe kind of resolve that issue, because it is a great resource, and I would hate to put a separation between the school and the town library.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that would be better to work on. I mean, I think this is a great idea for you guys now, so that you have a safe space and feel comfortable. But I'd also hope that you guys could find a way to work with the library to maybe make that transition back there.
I
And
completely
if it means
agree.
beating up some 8th graders, go ahead. I'm just kidding.
Awesome job. And I mean, I think we can all tell your dedication from calling the library and the police department to advocate for students. So great job. And I have to thank the Student Advisory Council too. I forgot to mention this, but an issue that's been persistent with students is the traffic in the mornings at the high school. And like for years, it was this huge, it just was a constant complaint. There was no solution. And there was a solution this year, and the traffic, there's a new entrance into the high school that's been open. And I'm not going to give it away because it's like my secret squirrel tunnel in the morning. But I just have to thank you because I know Student Advisory Council and the advisory reps played a huge part in that. So hats off to you.
I know who opened it.
Thank you.
Mr. Palladino, can I assume that the library being open to a certain time every day is a staffing and budgetary issue?
Well, can I speak to that, Dr. DeAndrea? Yeah. This morning, Dr. DeAndrea has approved funding for us to do a little pilot with the library, opening up one day a week. And Gisela and my Student Advisory Council and myself will be kind of monitoring it to see how it goes. Is there a greater need? Is there not as great a need as we thought? And just to report back to Dr. DeAndrea with kind of our evidence and what we've seen over a few times. And I'm hoping as the weather gets colder, this might be a good outlet, whether it be a kid who needs to wait for a ride, or maybe a kid that needs to do some research, or a student just looking for a quiet area to study, that they'll take advantage of it and won't have to cross Marion Road, which can be dangerous, but certainly I think it'd be nice on the inclement days just to be able to stay home base right at the high school. So we'll keep you posted. I'm sure that the next time they show up, they'll give you a full report on kind of the usage. And so we're pretty excited about it. I think it's going to be a great outlet for our students.
Right. Thank you, Gisela. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Provocative report, and I like that. On the matter of the library, I am disturbed by the actions of the library. I want you to imagine that there were 2 or 3 adults who were acting inappropriately in the library. And the library said, all right, you're acting inappropriately, all the adults get out. Well, they would never do that, right? Because after all, they're adults and they don't want to kick all their adults out when there are only 2 or 3 that are being inappropriate. Right. The library's inability to differentiate between serious studying adolescents, if you will, and the 2 or 3 that caused the problem is unacceptable to me. It's unacceptable, although I very much appreciate it, that we're piloting something that will try to make up for what the library has done to the students of Wareham. So put me down as somebody who finds your accommodation to be laudable, but should never be happening.
I agree.
And maybe this is a discussion that the superintendent can have with the town administrator, the director of the library, somebody who sees the fallacy of kicking every student out just because 3 of them are acting inappropriately, because I, for one, think it's unsatisfactory. The second issue. think of two extremes. One extreme is everybody wears a uniform, okay? Right? There have been people who have actually thought about uniforms perhaps should be a good idea. Because there's certainly, they happen all the time in other schools, private schools, even some public schools. The other extreme, of course, is wear anything you like, we don't care. Somewhere in the middle is probably where most principals want to be. What I don't, as a school committee member, not as a principal, and I'm very much aware that I am not the principal, we don't want what people are wearing to be the subject in the classroom. So the more it draws attention, which of course everybody wearing the same uniform, it doesn't draw attention at all. But the more it draws attention, even for perhaps cultural reasons, the less it is about what learning is going on in the classroom. So with respect, and I mean that with respect, I'm not sure I like the idea of making dress a cultural statement. Partly because one person's cultural statement is another person's, God forbid, political statement, or whatever kind of statement. I think it's a problem when you get into making a statement of any kind with what you wear. So I would urge not necessarily uniforms, but that the dress code be designed to make everybody comfortable, but not have anybody stick out and become the subject of the day.
I think those are in line with our conversations. I don't think they're looking for anything extreme. I can assure you they're not looking for uniforms either. So I think, to your point, there'll be somewhere in between, and I think after having a chance to meet quite a few more times, survey some students, et cetera, I think we'll have a great presentation, and I don't think you'll be thinking we're on one end of the spectrum or the other.
As someone who's been to a public school that's had uniforms, I understand what you're saying, but also one could argue that taking students out of classrooms and taking them out of time to study to get them in trouble for wearing something is distracting students from learning more than someone wearing a headband or a headscarf that might be not aligned with what you're used to.
Well,
They call it dress coded at the high school, and I don't think it's unique to Wareham. You were dress coded.
With the chair's permission, I would hope that the first incident would not be a huge big deal, and it would be a simple, maybe private conversation, between the teacher and the student. It's when it becomes an act of defiance, because it happens multiple times, that you might get into what you're describing, and then I don't think the teacher has much choice, because the rules have been set by the principal, and he or she has to enforce them.
April?
I completely understand what Jeff's point is. However, I do think that remembering that we are modeling our district, and I love this conversation, I love how involved you are and how thought-provoking all of your stances are on everything, because I think as adults who may have had a slightly different upbringing than what you guys are being brought up, the world that you guys are being brought up is far different than the world we were brought up in, 100%. And the accessibility to digging into your culture and social media and different things that are becoming more acceptable and less acceptable, the finding of your voice in your generation is beyond measure, and I am super proud to witness it and have a child in that generation that is of the student body that just embraces who they are. I feel like, you'll always have those people who will have something to say because they say things because they don't they fear what they don't understand. And that's just across the board throughout the country right now in general. I think the fact that we are basing our curriculum at the high school is very student-driven and working with trying to be more of an IB for all mentality, where we're taking sort of that thought-provoking, less structured, but still structured. I think it's an opportunity for, as you said, for kids to learn. So if people do have a difference of a culture identity and there is a distracting conversation, I feel that the way that our high school is modeled, that they are able to take that and incorporate into whatever their current lesson is, because we're teaching our kids to go forth and represent Wareham and the education, the well-rounded education, and the diverse culture that we have in our town forward. And by accepting and incorporating those things and having those conversations, our kids are going to probably have a far better time adapting in the real world where things aren't uniform, where they are going to see different things and different cultures, and we're going to not be shocked and confused by it. We'll have had thoughtful and thought-provoking conversations about it, and I think have a better understanding of our kids going forward with more tolerance than a lot of other districts. So I think it's absolutely incredible, the point of view that you're taking, that you understand that it's not for, as Jeff said, defiance. I do think that there will be people who will always want to push the defiance side, and that's in any sort of discipline, dress code aside. So I think it's huge that you guys are surveying the students, that you're taking their feelings and their thoughts and their experiences so seriously, and that you really are listening to them, and that's huge. And I think that that's above and beyond any district I've ever witnessed, and I think it's great that we have this council and that we have you on it.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Sean?
Gisela, I emailed you the Crown Act
Thank you.
information, okay? Just so you have it. All right, good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Giselle.
Great job.
Don't go anywhere, Mr.
I
Palladino.
am staying put.
It's my understanding you're representing Mr. Gardner, who could not be here tonight.
I am going to do my best to represent Mr. Gardner. Unfortunately, he is ill and could not be here. He was hoping to be possibly online, but it just didn't work out. So I'm going to do my best to represent him to the best of my ability. Mr. Gardner came to me in the late spring last year and said, I think I want to start another trip abroad. And I said, okay. I said, I don't care what you do, but make sure we take out insurance. And he said, done. So he is proposing, I think, an unbelievable opportunity for our students. It's going to be entitled World War II in the Western Front, and it's going to be in June of 2025. So I know it's a ways away, but I encourage teachers to push it out as far as they can to allow for a couple things to happen. One, some really big fundraising opportunities so we can kind of level the field and get as many students that want to go the opportunity to go. Two, it also allows for parents to create a payment plan that traditionally can be less than $100 each month, and I think that's palatable. So it does a couple things there. So this would be with EF Tours, and we've had some tremendous trips with EF Tours. As a matter of fact, a certain school committee member went on one of those trips. I believe it was either Costa Rica or Belize.
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica, thank you.
Costa Rica.
Thank you. And we've done 9 tours from the Wareham High School with EF Tours, and I'd just like to read them off real quickly. We did England and Scotland, Italy and France, Greece, Spain, Italy, Scotland and Ireland, Costa Rica, and Belize. And these trips have been a tremendous success. Sometimes we have some things, like I think maybe on yours, there was an issue with the flights, and EF Tours came through and got our people back. And there was one trip in Greece, they were having an uprising in Greece, and EF Tours positioned our kids over 100 miles away from the uprising to make sure they were safe. So it's really, I think, a wonderful tour company. As I mentioned, it's in June, strategically placed so the students wouldn't miss school, barring major snowstorms, which we're not anticipating in 2025 or the fall and winter of 2024. So if you know anything about EF Tours, they've been around for a long time, 55 years experience. They provide 24/7 support if there are any issues. When I was, I think it was my second year as principal, we had that Greece issue. I was able to call and find out where they were and was able to communicate and make sure our kids were safe. The director is there, assigned to our group. There's a tour guide that stays with the students, is there throughout the tour, and it's just a tremendous opportunity. They have a 1-to-6 ratio, which is an unbelievable ratio. Our DC trip is 1-to-10, so the ratio for the international trips abroad are obviously a lower ratio, and it's going to be, I think, a great program. There's all kinds of travel protection now, as you can understand, with the uncertainty of COVID. And the cost is estimated at $4,399. Obviously, that can fluctuate a little bit depending on prices for fuel and flights. That's kind of the fluctuation that we may see. If people lock in early, they get discounts. Adults would be a little bit more money, and students can enroll for only $95, and their parents or guardians can make payments over the next 33 months. So just a little bit over $100 per month could get them on that trip. They have a donation page, which is really great. So instead of asking grandma and grandpa for a holiday gift or maybe a birthday gift, you can ask them to put the money on their account. They can do it directly with a credit card. And again, Chris is, as you know, Chris is a very organized person. I am 100% confident in his ability to properly supervise this, and I just hope that we have enough interest to make this work, and I'm pretty confident we will. So that's my presentation through Chris for this World War II and Western Front trip for June 2025. I will do my best to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Joyce?
I just want to say, yes, it's obvious he's done a lot of work putting this all together. My only question is around the cancellation. So I see that there's 2 different versions of the cancellation, and we know what happened the last time. So just to try to avoid that, if it's not mandatory that they have the refundable, get your money back, that they at least acknowledge that they know that it was available and they didn't purchase it?
Chris is going to encourage everyone to take the insurance, and I believe I talked to him today on the phone, and he said if they take the insurance, the only thing they'll lose is the $95 enrollment fee, which I think on a $4,000+ trip, you can absorb that if we go into another pandemic, which hopefully that's not the case.
Right, let's.
But we have to
to
err on the side of caution, obviously. So I agree. We don't want to revisit that.
And I love that he timed it around school, after school ends, so it's not going to interfere with sports or any other activities that the kids haven't. Because 2025, they might not know what they're going to be doing on April vacation in 2025.
Right.
But in the summer, you can plan. Yeah.
Right. No, I loved it when he presented it in the spring last year, and I said, at this point, we'll get on an early fall school committee meeting. But I also love that he didn't want to wait for another, 2 weeks, because he really wants to get this out, get the information to the students, and get the ball rolling, and give them as many months as possible to make those payments, to keep that number down as low as possible for the families.
Brennan, you had a question?
Well, I was just curious about, as the trip is, being put out, 3 years from now, is it only going to be open to, I'm assuming that if a kid's a junior now, he couldn't sign up for the trip, so what age, what grades are we going to be putting this towards? And when, I guess, what would be the cutoff date to, you said to see how many people were interested in it? What's the cutoff date so that we can know whether we're going forth or not?
So the nice thing about EF Tours is it's a fairly fluid process. So Chris is going to use January 1 as kind of the cutoff date to see if it's realistic to move forward with this. But what's really, I think, cool about the program is kids can sign up at any point in time. So to your point, Brennan, he's going to be targeting, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. But every year he'll be able to revisit this with the 8th graders and show them that this is an option for the next couple of years. And if someone wanted to jump on, I think the actual, real cutoff date is probably February of 2025. But, of course, they're going to have to front all the money up front. The idea, what Chris wanted, was to get this started now, again, to keep the price down per month so that it's affordable.
Thank you. Jeff?
That gets to the critical issue, which is, this is a quote in 2022 dollars, meaning if there's 8% inflation for the next 2 years, they're not going to live with this price, are they?
My understanding is, once you sign up, the price is locked.
It's fixed.
That's my understanding. So with our DC trip, when they signed up, and the price does get a little bit more expensive as you get closer to the date if you sign up later. But our best price for DC was if they signed up before June of 2022, they got the best price. And then it went up $50 after that. And if they sign up after...
Incentive to commit.
Right, because they have to block off said number of rooms, said number of flights. So the earlier they do it, as you know, the better price they're getting. So it's definitely, once you sign up, that's the price. It's not... The only way it could fluctuate as if he didn't get enough students, but I don't see that being a problem. He only needs 6 to make it fly.
Oh, and that was my second question. He literally, he would go with 6.
I don't want to speak for him about, I don't think he would go if it was 6, but I think he's looking for double digits.
Maximum?
There's not a maximum, it's just the maximum is how many chaperones from Wareham High School can we get to commit to being on a trip abroad at the end of the school year when school is out. That would be,
Committee members volunteer?
they have to be affiliated with a high school. Mr. Sweat has gone before, so as long as they're affiliated with a high school, they can go.
Tell Craig, not Craig.
That was your last trip.
Yeah, I was going to say, Craig is my reference. He was my roommate, so put me down.
I will let Chris know. That's great.
Yes.
That's awesome. Tennis will be over by then?
I was about to, yeah, actually, I'm thinking, if we do as well as we did last year, I literally wouldn't be able to go, but I think that's unlikely.
All right.
And you have
Get the
a
insurance.
transportation plan, yeah.
I hope I have that problem, let's put it that way.
Yeah, right.
So as part of the program, I'm sure that there are probably a lot of kids that would be interested that would probably need help and guidance with passports and things like that. Do they have that all set up to help the families get passports and like the visa travel information?
Yes. So there are internal deadlines in regards to when those things have to be done because I believe the passport can take up to 6 months to get, so they're
delayed a lot. Some of them.
It's a lot faster than that.
Okay, well, with one trip, it was 6 months, and so they have like kind of by the 6 months prior to leaving, so say in, mid-December, they have to present a copy of their passport. So they have deadlines, and the advisors have always done a great job of supporting students, sometimes even bringing them down to the post office to get a passport. So it's not a problem, and they can pay for an expedited passport if for some reason they're behind the 8 ball as well. So again, we've been doing it for 9 years. It hasn't been the same advisor running each trip, but we have people inside with a lot of institutional knowledge on how this works. And as a matter of fact, we may be here in a future meeting. We've got another teacher who's trying to run a trip. So we've got a lot of experience in the building with this. Honestly, of the 9, I don't ever remember having an issue with a kid not having a passport or not having proper vaccinations or anything like that. It's been pretty streamlined, and we have a lot of support from those people, the nurse's office, and obviously EF Tours. This is their gig.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Go, Andrea?
I just wanted to ask about what would be taught prior to the trip because it being about World War II, this can be a very, very intense emotional experience for adults as well as students, I would assume. So I'm just hopeful, and I can assume that there'll be some really clear discussions and guidelines around how that material is presented and how they'll process that through a trip. I know adults that have gone on similar trips, and it can be extremely intense. So.
Well, it's pretty cool that we have a world history teacher taking the students there. So it obviously, Chris, when I spoke to him this afternoon, he was just talking about the opportunity for his students to see in real life things and places that they've studied. So there is an educational component with all of these trips.
I know, yeah.
Some more than others, but there's many meetings after school where they talk about the trip, the itinerary, what they're going to see, the historical importance. So there'll be many meetings prior and meetings with parents as well. So there's a whole curriculum that EF has that I'm sure Chris will incorporate and add and supplement pieces from his own education, his own classes. So I'm not worried about, usually that's something that I really push if they have to miss class time as well. There'll still be a push on that educational piece. But Chris, I guarantee will do a great job, and maybe you'll have him come back in the fall of 2025 to report out.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the Western Front trip?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? 500.
Thank you, and I know Chris thanks you.
And next we have a budget transfer vote. Kristen, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I do have a budget transfer for this evening for your consideration. It's in the Wareham Elementary School utilities line. We have, our electric usage has increased quite a bit over the summer, and it's due mainly to an issue that we were having with moisture control. So the remedy at the time was to run the heating system and the cooling system concurrently at the same time. So you can imagine what that does to the electric usage. I just got the most recent invoice today, and there was quite a spike in the electric usage for the month of August. So this happened roughly around the end of July, and I know from speaking with the director of facilities, he was in constant contact with the engineers and the HVAC controls and the OPM on the project to try to see what we could do to both control the moisture, and then once that was under control, to put the system back to a regular mode so that we're not running both things at the same time. So that took quite a few weeks to get under control, and now I'm happy to say that it's running back in what's called the occupied and unoccupied mode. So occupied is when the students and staff are in the building, and unoccupied is when no one's in the building. So we're not running everything all the time. So I'm hopeful that the next electricity invoice that we get will be back to more normal usage, and we'll be able to use that as more of a predictor of what our usage will be. So that being said, like I said, we have exhausted the budget for electricity, for utilities rather, in Wareham Elementary School. We have encumbered for our other utilities. So it's not like we don't have anything for the rest of the year. That's been encumbered for any of the other utilities that we pay. It's the electricity, and so we need to, so what I've requested is first a $25,000 transfer that we needed to do just a few weeks ago in order to pay our more recent invoice at the time. The town doesn't allow bills to be paid of lines in deficit, so and we didn't want to incur late fees because we can't pay them, and then it just gets us off our payment schedule, and it just wreaks a little bit of havoc with the billing. So that was the first transfer, and then the second one is I'm requesting for a total of $70,000 for the second one, and I'm hopeful that that's going to get us through the next several months, and then we can have more predictability. The accounts that I have requested to transfer from, the first one was from high school utilities. I looked at the history from last year, what we budgeted this year, what we've expended, and what we've encumbered, and it seems like that is an area that we can safely transfer some funds for. And then the second transfer, I also looked at high school utilities, but I also looked at the Wareham Elementary other accounts, Wareham Elementary heating and equipment repairs, and I thought that we could transfer a little bit from those accounts. So that's my request. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I can certainly hope to answer them.
Anyone, any questions? Joyce?
So I think you did answer this, but so when you say encumbered, so you've estimated through the end of the year so by making this transfer, we're not going to have to transfer again next month and the month after?
No, so for this one, for the electricity, I've only I'm hoping it's going to get us through December 30th. Like I said, next time I get the invoice, this particular one that came today, it was quite high, but it was for August 28th to September 28th. Our electric usage really spiked in August, and then we were able to go back to the regular control sequence probably as of a few weeks ago, and it did dip down in September. So hopefully the next invoice, then I'll have a better answer for you what we may or may not need for the rest of the year. It's also difficult because we don't have a full year's history, or even more than a few years' history of what the electric usage in that occupied building is going to look like. So, hopefully this will get us through the next several months, and then it's something that we're going to have to keep monitoring and probably address in next year's budget as well.
Jeff?
Okay.
So just to be clear,
Microphone.
you're saying that for the month of July and August, we used all of the money allocated for electricity for the entire year.
That's correct.
April.
So this was because of the extended heat wave and the not anticipating how the new elementary school's cooling system, is that correct, when it led to the over moisture issue? This is all tied to that same incident?
From my understanding, yes.
May I? Yeah.
Sure.
Yes, so it's kind of a combination of, it was extraordinarily hot and humid in July, and we did have the moisture issue. We brought in dehumidifiers to bring down the humidity, that, and they were industrial strength dehumidifiers. We had 9 of them running for 24 hours for a week. In addition, the increase in costs for electricity. So it was kind of the perfect storm that hit, and we had an extraordinarily high electric bill.
So we'll have a better idea, hopefully in a couple of months, what the average is
I
going
hope
to be?
so, yes, yes. I would think so, because then we will have a picture of it absent running both systems full force all the time. So that'll give us a little bit of a better baseline.
And dehumidifiers.
Dr. Schwam?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention too that the summer program was huge, and it was at the elementary school. So it was full of students as well and faculty. Just, it wasn't empty, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Brennan?
Go ahead.
We do have, from when the building opened in January, we do have numbers from January, February, March, April, that are significantly lower, that I'm hopeful and confident that it'll lower down to. We're just going to have to figure out how we're going to manage the summer. Hopefully, we won't have a humidity issue in the building that we would have to bring and run. We're going to have to run dehumidifiers. I'm pretty sure of that, but maybe not as much. And so I think, over time, we'll be able to get a better idea and a better grip on this issue. And we also have met with a company that provides solar panels, and that building is equipped for solar panels. So that's something that we can explore with the school committee as a strategy to bring down the electrical costs in that building.
Thank you. Brennan?
I'm not great with all these numbers yet, but you're saying that you'll have a better idea a couple months down the road. So rather than ask for this amount now, I'm just throwing this out there, would it maybe be better for us to just approve the amount that we need for the bill and kind of kick the can down the road a little bit until we have a better idea? Because this 70,000, I'm sure you guys based it on, previous information and everything, but it could be a drop in the bucket compared to what we might actually need or not. So is there maybe a different strategy for us to make sure that we don't, default on any of our bills, but don't commit any more money than we need to until we have better information? Or are you guys comfortable saying, we'll take this now and it will, we're not going to face a dire situation a month down the road when we get the bills? It's not going to be like that 70 grand was way off. We should have asked for twice that much. I mean, am I making sense with
Yes.
that? Okay.
So I think at this point, right now, the balance in the account is $65. And the most recent invoice that we received that just came today, the current charges is just $46,700. So I would need at least that. And the sticking point is that in order for our bills to be processed and approved and released on time, we have to have a positive balance, or we have to have enough money to cover whatever bill we're trying to pay. So this is going to get us through this invoice, and I'm hoping it's going to get us through at least October and November, and December. So that was my line of thinking in that. And then at that point, we will have a better knowledge of what accounts we have available funds to transfer from, because I don't want to take too much now and then have just run into the same problem in a different area of the budget, right? But I want to take enough so that we can continue to process our payments, in a timely fashion. So we can approve a lesser amount at this meeting, but I will likely be back, in another month or so requesting a similar, another amount.
And you may have to do that even if we approve this.
I don't think this is going to be the last time that we hear about
Understandable. I
this,
just want to get a
unfortunately.
better
Sure.
idea
No,
of
I
it.
understand. Thank you.
So do I have a motion to accept the transfers?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? 500. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now I believe you're up again on uniform grant guidance, which you had sent out to us. We had a chance to read in our packet. So, okay.
So, as part of the ESSER application, districts that applied for ESSER funds, they were required to have, when you accept federal funds, federal grant funds, you should follow the federal grant guidance. And that centers, a lot of it is around procurement. And in Massachusetts, we have very stringent procurement laws, and they're actually, in some cases, more strict than the federal. So the idea is you follow whatever is the more strict. But there are some things that the federal grant guidance covers that the state doesn't. And because we're accepting federal funds for grants, for our ESSER grants and a lot of our grants, also school lunch, we are required to follow federal guidance. So over the summer, the Department of Ed, because they accept the federal funds and pass them out to the local school districts, they were required to prove that they are following and adhering to this guidance, and that they're the schools that they're granting these funds to are following it. So several schools were selected for an audit, those that had ESSER applications, and Wareham was one of them. So we were notified over the summer that our policies, and as part of your application, you had to submit your procurement policies and your other documents. So they reviewed that, and Wareham is not alone. I was on a call a few months ago, and there was a lot of us on there that were found not to have submitted what they wanted, what they were required to look for. So in that, as I said in my memo, I reached out to the DESE audit and compliance staff, especially because I hadn't been a part of that original submission. I wasn't sure what had been submitted and what they were looking for. And they said, they advised that, well, really, there is a federal grants guidance template that was developed by DESE and by MASBO, Mass Association of School Business Officials, and that if we were to adopt that would be in compliance. So a lot of the things that are in here are things that most schools do as a practice. A lot of it just wasn't written down. So some of this is just writing down what you're going to be doing. But a lot of it is common sense. It's procurement, the Massachusetts regulations, as I said, which are more stringent. So we were already doing well with that. It was just some of the things that were particular to the federal guidelines. So with that, here is the draft of the guidance, and it will actually help us to comply with the audit finding, I don't want to say finding, but the audit concern that we received, like many other schools. And it will also be helpful because we are applying for some other federal funds for a heating, ventilation, and indoor air quality grant through DESE. And you are required to upload your procurement policies, and I know that if we uploaded ours that basically say we're following state regulations, that we would be in the same boat. So it's timely. And we are also undergoing a school lunch audit, an administrative review next month, and that is one of the look-fors for that as well. And I know from other districts some of the things that have been flagged for. So it is timely that we review this and hopefully pass it, and I can submit it up to DESE, and we will be in compliance.
Thank you for your work on this. Any questions? We have a motion to accept? Nope, question.
Yeah, I made the mistake of actually reading this thing. I won't ask who wrote it. There's certainly the grammar, et cetera, incomplete sentences. But even in the introduction, it talks, and I won't bore the committee with reading the section, but it basically says that anybody who's going to be working with federal and state grants should review this. Can I take it from our assistant superintendent that you've enjoyed reading this as much as I did?
I didn't read it.
I
wasn't involved in the conversation
Okay.
initially.
According to this, you should be, quote, review and become familiar with the information contained in this manual.
All right, then, I will.
And this is something that once it becomes hopefully passed, that will be sent out to the folks that manage the grants. And we do have monthly grants management meetings, so that we just started that yesterday, so that's certainly something that we can bring forward.
I had a follow-up question, but obviously I'm not going to ask it because you haven't read it yet.
I can pretend.
No, that's okay. There were a couple of other interesting, no, that's just a sentence that didn't make any sense, so I won't ask you about that. Preparation of grant approvals is one of the sections. And it says, after receiving a GAN, which is grant approval,
acknowledgement.
something,
Yeah.
all grants are approved by the school committee. I thought that was an interesting line. I'm going to, all grants, federal, state, have to be, the budgets for those grants, really is what it's saying, have to be approved by the school committee. Are you aware that that's what this says?
I am aware, and school committee should vote to accept all grants.
It has not been our past practice to do that.
I believe that is what should be happening.
I think I look forward to the presentation of those budgets, because there's a lot of grant budgets that go through this
30.
district. Excuse me?
There's like 30 grants.
Yeah, and that would, of course, include ARP, ARPA, the federal,
Yeah,
ESSER, whatever is, yeah, ESSER, which is the hugest of all. So I was surprised. It also talked about amending the budget. So even the amending of the budget process, it doesn't refer to the school committee.
Right.
But it seems to me, if we have to approve the initial budget, we have to approve the amending of that budget, because otherwise you could amend it to your heart's content and we would have no knowledge of that.
So my understanding is that the school, and I'm happy to be, to have this looked into, the school committee votes to accept the grant, not to approve how the grant is used. The grantor is the one who has to have that final approval of how the grant is used. Now, school committee would be informed, this is what we're proposing, and would be part of the decision, but ultimately the grantor is the one who says, yes, you can use the grant in this manner.
I understand. That's also part of the process, and I agree completely with what you're saying. But if we're going to be approving the grant, we have to know what it's going to be used for, and therefore we need to see the budget for it.
Right. Well, again, my understanding is you don't approve what it's used for, you vote to accept it.
Yeah,
That you will
speaking
accept the
only
grant and follow the rules of the grant.
Speaking only for myself, okay? If I'm going to be approving something, I want to know how it's used, and the only way I'm going to know how it's used is if I actually get to see the budget. So speaking only for myself, and that means, since this is to be voted on, correct, to be approved, because that's part of the process. This is a draft because you're waiting for us to approve it. I want the amending of the budget to include the school committee, speaking only for myself.
But I would just say, however, that it was very much delineated that school committee has to approve all grants. It says here, the superintendent or her designee will approve all grant amendments prior to them being submitted to DESE. So I don't see where we are involved in that, other than after the fact.
I agree, and I want that corrected.
So,
Because this is a manual that is a template. And thank goodness Kristen wasn't asked to write this, because that would have been absurd,
Federal
okay?
government wrote it.
Okay, so what I'm saying, we have the flexibility to change this, because it's literally a template that is, most of it is fine. But I would like the amending of the budget to include the school committee as recommended to us by the superintendent.
So I will let April speak first, but so you're asking for an amendment to approve all grant amendments? An amendment of this document, that school committee approves all grant amendments?
Yes.
Correct? Okay. April?
So when it is coming to, from just my understanding, so us approving the grant is much like, I'm looking at it like when you bring to us the payroll and the bill payment warrants, where we are approving it, but as a, just publicly, but not actually having anything to do with those actual numbers and line items. Does that make sense?
in my.
Like, you know, like when we get the superintendent
Yeah.
report and it says we approve the payroll and bill warrants, and I'm reading this as that's what we're being asked to approve in lieu of the grant, but the individual line items are going through the superintendent and the finance director. Is that right, or am I completely off?
So my experience is similar to Dr. DeAndrea's, that so districts are allotted grants, some of them are entitlements, some of them are competitive, and there's a cycle of applying for them. And so you get approved by DESE for the funds that they have allotted to you. At that point, that's when, at some point, say a lot of the grants, I'm just speaking from my experience, the grants are due, the applications are due sometime over the summer for the start of the school year, a lot of them. So sometime in the fall, at a school committee meeting, we would present the grants with what their total amount is and a brief description of what the grant is for, the priorities of the grant. And the school committee, as Dr. DeAndrea had said, would vote to accept the grant as, not necessarily vote to accept the budget, but vote to accept the grant and acknowledge the grant. And then throughout the course of the year, I would include a grants update in my presentation to the school committee. Basically similar to a budget update. And I would like to say one thing about the amendment, because I think a grant amendment, what that means is, in practical terms, is you are allowed to overexpend any grant category. So it would be professional salaries, support staff salaries, supplies and materials, travel, contractual services, other costs. You are allowed to overexpend that major line by 10%. Once you have hit more than 10%, then you have to request an amendment from the Department of Education, from your grants liaison. You have to file a form, and say what you're doing, what you're amending. You're taking some money from one category, supplies, to professional staff salaries, for example. And then they will approve or not approve, and then you can continue. So, for example, sometimes in some smaller line items, you hit that 10% quickly, and things sometimes can change. Say you have professional salaries as stipends, and a program that you're going to fund, you either had more stipends that you found that you used, or less. So sometimes then you want to use it to buy more supplies. Maybe you want to buy more Chromebooks. Oh, but I've already, that's going to be more than that 10%. So that's when the term amendment comes in. So it's just aligning the grant to what you've spent. Now, obviously, a major change in your grant priorities is a different conversation. But a lot of the grants are pretty strict with what their priorities are. So, for example, the grant that we're working on right now, it's the indoor air quality and ventilation. It was really targeted towards, obviously, improvements in indoor air quality and ventilation. And there's priorities that you're required, if you want to apply for and receive those funds, you're required to put in some, program services that are going to address those priorities. So for example, this one, it said, I was on a call today with the facilities director, a DESI webinar about it because the submission due date is coming. Can we use it to replace windows and doors? And the answer is basically no, only to the extent if it allows you to get more ventilation. So in other words, if you had windows that didn't open, then you could replace your windows that way. But if you just want to get nice new windows, that's not what they're going to approve. So that's just an example. So there is a prescribed process, an approval process, and a review process. But to your point, Mr. Sweat, if there's something that during this course of the grants that we can provide, we can certainly do that.
So as we move, I'm sorry, Joyce?
I just had a question about when, Jeff, you used the word template, but I thought of this as more of a compilation of the law. Is that true?
That is also true. So there are some things in here that saying, for example, some of the federal requirements, some of the procurement requirements, some of the accounting requirements, some of the, provisions for using women and minority-owned businesses, for example, the provisions for complying with some of the labor acts. So it is both. But, like I said, in order to receive federal funds, you do have to prove that you have a policy. And like I said, I'm not sure what was submitted, but the purchasing school committee policy, the purchasing policy is one page. But I mean, it's sufficient because it says we will comply with Mass General Law, and it's the law we have to do. But the feds are looking for something more. So that's what brings me to you today.
And isn't it also true, sorry, Jeff, just one more question. Isn't it also true that we do receive notification of what grants, so when we get the warrant every week, it's described on there. If it's coming out of a budget line, that's noted, but if it's coming out of a grant, that's noted also. So it's not a report just on grants, but it does show if an expense is being paid out of a grant on those warrants.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, okay.
So I will either entertain a motion to accept the uniform grant guidance as is written in front of us, or Jeff, do you want to propose an amendment first?
Well, but to Joyce's good point, if we deleted a section of this, then we might find ourselves in trouble because it could be a section that's required by state or federal. The state apparently is more strict, more cumbersome, more comprehensive than the federal, so this is both passing muster with the federal government as well as the state government. If we augment it, we're not going to run afoul of the law, but if we start deleting sections, we could very well. And so what I'm suggesting, let's put it this way. We all know on this committee that we are asked to sign things that we really don't have in-depth knowledge of. And the warrants are a perfectly good example. We're approving things, almost on faith, okay? And we even, sometimes, as we acknowledged in a previous meeting, approve gifts that have already been received, which is interesting.
But I would say, as far as the warrants go, I've asked many questions. I mean, if I had any question on a warrant that I was being asked to approve, trust me, I was asking those questions. I didn't approve them blindly. I understand what you're saying. It's a lot of information given to us that, but I never, asked for copies of invoices many, many times.
I guess, to me, well, let me be incredibly candid. The ESSER money, I want to approve as a school committee member because it's millions of dollars that is going to the operations of the school district. As compared to, and it supplants spending that would ordinarily have to come out of the regular school budget. as compared to Title I, which augments and has to be accounted for dollar, and it doesn't supplant anything, it supplements.
Correct.
And there's a huge difference between those two. So, to me, this is an opportunity to say, okay, but I would agree that under normal circumstances, we don't need to see the budget of everything that's supplementing what we do, as long as we have a general idea what it's going to do, and it sounds like something we want to be associated with it. But that's different from something that literally supplants operating expenses. So, you know, I don't want to go crazy with this, but if I was going to make an amendment, I would either delete the school committee approval or add the school committee to the amendment. I want it to be consistent, because either we're approving these grants, including what they're going to be used for, and even if the budget doesn't mean all that much to us, we get to review it, which is exactly what you do with the warrants and ask appropriate questions. I am certain of that. But I'm not going to have them amended after I've approved them, because that makes my approval meaningless unless I also get to approve the amendments.
Dr. DeAndrea, then April.
That's, in my experience, the school committee does not approve how the grant is spent. They only vote to accept the grant.
That's 100% of grants, and that would include ESSER, in other words.
ESSER was a little bit different, because ESSER was, they asked that you had the stakeholder groups, and that was a different animal, and it was a tremendous amount of money, and they did want school committee more involved in that. But grants in general, in my experience, again, the school committee votes only to accept, not to approve how it's used. The grantor is the one who is granting the money, so they approve how it is used. So we have to submit the budget. This is how we're going to use your money, and they say, okay, we'll allow that. If we want to change that, we have to submit an amendment to them, and they have to approve it. Now, if we have school committee also having to approve that, that means we have two bodies that we have to go to and ask, can we spend it this way? And
Correct.
right. And that would slow things way down, and could actually be conflicting if you're saying, yes, we want you to spend it this way, and the Department of Ed says, no, you can't spend it that way, or vice versa.
Whoa, that's not a problem, because if we say, looks good to us, and DESI or whoever it is says no,
then it's no.
then it's no. And if we say no, it never goes to DESI, because it hasn't gotten our approval. So that's easy.
It's not
April.
easy. It's not easy.
April?
So this to just quickly. So this is to make things uniform when you guys are applying, because the grants that you're applying for right now, we don't have something that's just uniform that you send out. Like, this is what we have as a protocol, right? This is more for the grantors than it is for us. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, I think
Okay,
that's
so
accurate.
if we approve this as a understanding that this isn't for our protocol, our policies, our moving forward, with the understanding that we could request from the Director of Finance and the Superintendent that grants be presented to us to approve or applicate, whatever it is, but this is just to send to the grantors to accept, so that we have something where they can't say no, because it's basically, they wrote it, right? Essentially, like the federal government or the state government, either way, they align with this.
There were a lot of hands in this.
Right, so if we accept this, saying, okay, this is what we agree to send to the grantors so that we can get as much money from our district as easily as possible, but then have a policy possibly in place that for grant approval or budget, whatever, that we get presented like a budget update, that we get a grant update as well? Is that something we could just add to our agenda to be informed and approve this so that we can get as many grants as possible with as little red tape as possible?
I take your point.
I was going to say the same thing, just not in the same words, but same idea, yeah.
I just think if it's gonna make it easier for us to get as much money as humanly possible, then I'm all for however it's going to get us there. But I do understand Jeff's point that budgetary things does fall into the purview of the school committee, and we should have input be considered when grants are being presented. Whether or not it's necessary, I think it just shows a sign of like, this is part of our job, essentially, and we should be involved and at least have input.
So I'll make a motion that we accept the document as proposed by Kristen, with the understanding that maybe we'll have another conversation, as April is stating. But I make a motion that we approve it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 410. Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. Superintendent's report.
That was too many people. It was too many. 410.
What?
Yeah, the count. Jamie missed the count of the vote.
410.
It was 5 of us.
1.
4 to 1.
Oh.
Thanks, got it.
All right. First on my report, I have 2 gifts that I asked the school committee to accept. The first is a $770 donation to the class of 2025. From the following, $500 is from an anonymous source, $20 from, oh boy, I'm gonna have to pronounce these names, Mrs. Ikabuchi, $20 from Mr. Breda, $20 from Ms. Alexander, and $210 from Mrs. Walton. Thank you to them, and I ask that you accept that gift. Also, there's a second one, if you want to do them together. The second is backpack supplies donated from Walmart to the Wareham Elementary School.
So do I have a motion to accept those generous gifts?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? 500.
Thank you. Second is the bill and payroll warrants you see listed in the superintendent's newsletter. I ask that you vote to approve those warrants.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 500.
Thank you. Okay. Focus indicators. This was a conversation that we had at the last meeting. I know that you have received a copy of my goals. It says draft for the goals, but you have accepted and voted to approve the goals. So the last piece was the focus indicators. We had listed them after each goal, the focus indicators that aligned with each of the goals. We had a conversation around whether we were going to narrow the indicators down to these focus indicators or keep the entire rubric as part of the evaluation. So we're back here.
So as I see it, there are 11 focus indicators that have been chosen so far out of the 21 possible indicators. So we've gone over half of the focus indicators on this. And just quickly, under standard number 1, I saw 4 indicators. Under standard number 2, management operation, 1 indicator. Standard number 3, 3 indicators. Standard number 4, 3 indicators. And so the requirement is that there's a minimum of 1 indicator. If you do focus indicators, you have to have at least 1 in each of the 4 standards. So there are 11 here total. Everyone had the superintendent rubric. Last homework was to look at these and see if there was concerns that the committee had. We will be taking a vote on this tonight, whether or not to accept these 11 focus indicators or focus indicators in general as well. So any questions for Dr. DeAndrea? Abel?
So just a question, like on the draft where you have, like, say, under district improvement goal 1, for example, you have one focus indicator as the measure of that. And I believe that Jeff and I both agreed, I think at the last meeting, that 1 was not enough because it could span more than one kind of area, especially if it came down to, you know, management, staffing, things like that, whereas that only had 2A with the environmental, I think that's the environmental
Yep.
indicator. So like, for example, under that one, I believe like just having 1 might not be enough. I think that should also have, I think at least each one should have at least 4 indicators, because I think it's going to make it for a more comprehensive ability to justify where that goal has been met.
So can I just ask, so we worked with the superintendent on those, so what other focus indicator would you
So
include?
I made sure to try to pull them up. So now I went through each one, so I gotta try to see if I can remember if I saved them correctly. So under, say, like for the collaborating with building leaders, EMS, comprehensive emergency management plan, for example.
Wait, so which goal are you on?
District
Oh,
improvement goal
okay.
1, for
Yep.
example, right? Because some of these have more than 1, and I'm okay with that. But that, like, for the ones that have 1, I don't think that that's a fair assessment. So, like, having, for the environmental indicator, that's great, but there should also be the fiscal systems indicator, because that's also going to, you know, district improvement is also going to have to do with, you know, for training and things like that. That's going to include budgetary things, and things that are going to come out in that. So I think that's 2E as well as 2A for that particular one. Trying to think where the other one was. Hold on.
And we'll just add that the focus indicator has to be reflected of the goal. It has to do with the goal was one of the requirements. when you
Right,
pick a
and
focus indicator.
so if you're incorporating training modules and things like that, I think having the fiscal you know, how those trainings are gonna be impacting, or what's coming out of budgetary things, or where that money's coming from for the modules, for the trainings, and how that's going to be utilized, I think that's an important indicator, as well as the environmental aspect of it. And, I mean, unless no one else
You're
agrees
saying
with me.
2E?
2E as well as 2A.
So what kind of evidence would he give us?
So if, under training and modules, what trainings, what's the cost? Is this going to bring, like an outside professional development? Is this like, what if there's safety procedures and protocols that are changing? What is that costing? If there's any upgrades necessary for the safety and emergency management? I mean, I think those are all things that aren't free necessarily. So I think that having that as an indicator to see if that's been met would make sense to me. I think it would fall under the same goal. Am I the only, I don't know if anyone else agrees with me or not.
Jeff?
So I appreciate the exercise that everybody, including April, went through. I went through a somewhat different exercise, which is there are 21 indicators. And I went through and read the proficient section of every indicator. And I asked myself, were there any that I didn't care about? And the good news, bad news is there weren't. I cared about all of them. Now, I also recognized that for me to be a fair judge of the degree to which the superintendent had been proficient in any one of those 21 indicators would actually take a lot of effort. And I appreciate that. And in my own mind, I decided if I didn't have sufficient information, then I would rate it proficient, because unless I had something that indicated lack of proficiency, that I hadn't been able to glean from the effort that I had made, that there was a lack of proficiency, or for that matter, the opposite, I couldn't glean whether it was exemplary or not, then the default had to be proficient. But if I had actually been fortunate enough and made a sufficient effort to know to be able to differentiate those 4 different gradations of proficiency or lack thereof or greater than, then I would have a comment to make, which is the obligation that everybody has when they don't rate someone proficient, especially less than proficient. So bottom line is, I couldn't get comfortable eliminating any indicator.
So I don't want to disagree with you, because I don't, because I understand what you're saying, but I think that's counter to our goal, well, in my mind, was to make this as uniform a process as we could. And in doing that, making it fair, we're all evaluating on the same goals, the same indicators, and telling the superintendent ahead of time that that's what
Correct.
we're evaluating on. So
So-
what you're saying is that if you, just you...
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying I would like the committee to keep all 21.
But you might decide that you have the information to evaluate on one indicator, but I might not see it the same way, so you might...
Well, that could be true in any case.
That's gonna be and I agree with that.
You
Sorry.
get, we
But
both
that's
get
the whole-
we both get the same information, we could draw a different conclusion.
Exactly. So isn't that why we want focus indicators?
That's not going to prevent it, it's only going to narrow the number of times we could have a different opinion.
But I do think focus indicators allows the superintendent to supply us with specific evidence rather than getting a giant data dump or things just thrown at us that are supposed to cover 21 different indicators. I think we're going to get more focused evidence going forward, personally.
Maybe I'm looking at this differently. He has a set of goals. We've agreed and voted on and approved those set of goals. That set of goals will require competency, proficiency, expertise, et cetera, in order to achieve those goals. Independent of that, independent of the goals, there's the overall success in operating the district, which is what these 21 indicators are trying to say. These are all part of that process. So I'm not suggesting that we surprise our superintendent with, by the way, you didn't do certain things in achieving this goal, and they have nothing to do with the indicators that he would like to be judged on with respect to the goals. I'm just saying the overall evaluation is more than just achieving goals.
I don't disagree with that either.
And all 21 are part of, in my mind, that achievement of the operation of the district.
All right, I recognize Indiana, and then April, and then maybe we'll take a vote and see where we stand.
I just, I remember from the mask presentation, and I know that the guidance they gave was just guidance, but I do remember them saying that they recommend 1 to 2 focus indicators for each goal. And since we've already approved, or since you have already approved the goals, I feel like sticking with that would make it more uniform if we're already sticking to the guidance for the goals. And that's,
Thank you. April?
So I agree with Jeff that having the full spectrum of things, I think the only way that any of these become issue would be if the goal was not met. Like Jeff said, the only time the indicator are going to be detrimental to the evaluation is if there was no, and if the superintendent is providing us evidence and we're using the focus indicators and finding him at least proficient, if not exemplary, which is obviously his goal, especially being new to the district. We know, I don't believe that any of these goals have been unrealistic to meet, and some of them are a 2-year goal. And I think we also have to take that into consideration as well. So like, say if it's halfway through the 2-year goal and we have access to all of the focus indicators as Jeff had suggested, we can say, yes, we feel like this absolutely. However, we think that since it's a 2-year goal, this is where maybe we'd like to see more evidence, or maybe we saw too much of this evidence and it's more of like a working document than it is something to be like condemnable. I think if we have more information, because the only time it's ever going to be an issue is if it's needs improvement, to be honest. If it's proficient or above, this whole focus indicator thing is a moot point, in my opinion. because obviously the goal will have been met, we'll have had the information, and we'll be moving in the direction that we want to continue moving. So I don't see how having, limiting it is going to be detrimental to anything.
All right, Dr. DeAndrea?
Well, I just want to make sure I understand. So the way I see it is, so I have to provide evidence that I have achieved these goals, or where I am with the goals. I have to provide evidence. That evidence, the way when I picked these focus indicators, was that these, when I present this evidence, it's also going to be evidence that I have addressed that indicator, or how proficient or not proficient I am in those certain indicators. So you're going to have evidence for those indicators. If you were to say we're going to use the whole rubric, would the expectation be I have to provide evidence to show I'm proficient for 21 indicators?
So I would look at it as the focus indicators that you suggested be like the priority indicators, like this is what you are telling us that you are providing 100% proof of, but by having access, in my opinion, of the other indicators, we're able to get a bigger picture, but those could be what you are but the evidence for us, in my opinion, of the other things is gonna be throughout the rest of the school committee meetings throughout the rest of the year, and any of the updates and reports that were given from the principals, from the finance director, from other things, updates in curriculum or things like that we're gonna be getting throughout the year. And I think that those can be used, in our meetings to go towards those other indicators, but the ones that you have chosen as these are what your priorities are, this is what you plan to focus on. I don't think that necessarily is a bad idea, but I don't think it should be limited to only two.
Okay,
For a bigger picture.
Brennan and then Jeff.
I was actually going to state exactly what he said, that I don't think that it's effective for him, because, if we're going to use the focus indicator, that says that we want him to focus on that, and that means he will have to provide 21 pieces of evidence on every goal. And I think that becomes unwieldy for him, and it kind of is going to make our
Nightmare.
Yeah, it's going to make it so much harder for us to evaluate him properly. I understand what you're saying, that you want to be able to use some of these, but I think that we do have to limit it to a more reasonable number, because making, for every one of these goals, he has to provide 21 pieces of evidence to prove that he's done the job proficiently. And it's going to become a case that it's going to be more about him making sure he provided the evidence than him actually trying to achieve the goal. He's going to be working towards the focus indicators more than the overall goal. He might, no offense, but your focus would naturally be, if I want to do a good job and I know I'm being graded on 21 criteria, I'm going to focus more on that 21 criteria and making sure I've got a check mark next to each of them, rather than worry about the big picture. Because when it comes down to it, those 20, the key word here is focus. He's going to have to focus on 21 areas in every goal. That seems unwieldy.
So,
Am I doing it wrong? Maybe I don't understand it, but...
I've obviously done a lot, do I have?
No, Jeff, yes, go ahead.
Okay. I guess I'm doing a lousy job of explaining. If we had hired you to do those, how many goals are there? 4?
4 or 5, yeah.
4 or 5,
Yeah.
For whatever the number is. If we had hired you to do those 4 or 5 goals, and we said to you, we don't care about anything else, just do those 4 or 5 things, that's all we care about, then I wouldn't have any problem with what we're talking about. Because all the indicators would be telling you is, these are the areas that we think are going to impact your ability to be successful achieving those goals. But clearly, you don't spend 100% of your time trying to achieve those goals. You got a lot of other stuff on your plate, right? So all that other stuff, how well you do it, has to be judged somehow, okay? And as I went through this exercise, I ask you, which one of these 21 things do you think are unimportant? Do you think laws and ethics are unimportant? You think fiscal matters are unimportant? Of course they're not. You wouldn't even pretend to say they're unimportant. They're not part of your goals, but they are part of your job. And it's that simple. And that's why I can't give up any of the indicators, even though I won't use probably the rest of those indicators to judge his success on the goals.
Okay, so I think everyone's had a chance to speak. I would like to entertain a motion to see where we stand as a committee at this point. Do I have a motion to accept the focus indicators as indicated?
Yes, so moved.
I have a second. All in favor?
Question,
Yes, go ahead.
does that mean I can't use any other indicator as a measure of the superintendent's overall success and if I do, I'm not following the directions of the school committee by doing so? Is that what that means?
I think if we agree to use focus indicators, to be fair to the superintendent, it means that we do just focus on those.
So all the rest of these indicators cannot be factors in judging the success of the school, of the superintendent.
I'm going to let first, Dr. Swan had a hand up first, and then Dr. DeAndre, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, the goals that have been identified and the indicators couldn't happen effectively if the other elements of the rubric were not addressed. It would bleed into yes, it would. I promise you it would. There are so many connections between and amongst them that if there are that many issues, if there's a problem, it will come through because they're connected. So I don't think by having a very clear focus on these indicators, which I think are goals that are necessary for moving us forward, that you're going to be fine.
Yeah, I'm just saying, we have 11 of them. Generally, math recommends 7 or 8, 6 to 8.
Yes.
We're up to 11 already. So we're over half already.
But that's not for each specific
No,
goal.
that's true.
That's overall, which that I understand. But if we had 11 that covered, that we say we chose 11 out of the 21 to cover the entire thing, that's a different conversation than having 1 to 2 to cover one goal. So saying we have 11 is kind of misleading because it's not per goal. So,
No, but 11 out of 21 is what we have. That's not misleading. It's just a fact. I know, I'm sorry. Everything's turned on. Joyce?
I just want to say that we, for better or worse, this process has been defined for us by DESE. This evaluation, right?
This has been defined for us.
Yes, but we are following the evaluation. We've created the goals to go along with the evaluation instrument, and this is the process that we're following.
Right.
Again,
Part of that
for better or
process is
worse.
to decide whether or not to use focus indicators. And that's what we're
Right.
obviously going to be voting on.
Okay.
So I don't know if Dr. Andrew, you want to say anything before we put this to a vote?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Actually, I do, but if I can, before we move on, I'm just, because I do understand Jeff's point a little bit better now with you explaining it, but I guess that what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a difference here between how we evaluate his goals and how we evaluate his overall performance.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I think that we should use the focus indicators as written to evaluate the goals, but maybe is there a way that we can add a component that opens up, basically add one more kind of goal that just says we can use all the focus indicators to judge an overall performance? Can we add an extra category like that to say, you know, these are the goals we want to focus on, but there will also be a addendum of, you know, overall performance, and then we can use all of these focus indicators if anything needs to be addressed. Let's say he accomplishes all of his goals perfectly, then focus indicators won't really matter. But like April said earlier, you know, if there's a problem, we want to be able to kind of narrow down what areas need to be improved in. So can we approve these goals with these focus indicators, but then add?
So, well, that comes down to the original vote still, whether or not we're going to agree to, because you're saying no to focus indicators then. So we're either going to agree to use focus indicators or we're not. There's no really in between. It's got to be one or the other.
Well, it kind of is in between because it's limiting which focus indicators. It's not whether or not we're voting to use them. It's whether we're voting, and the way I'm looking at it is we're voting to say we're going to use 2 on this goal. We're going to use 1 on this goal. We're going to use 1 on this goal instead of we're going to use all of them as an overall evaluation tool for the entire year. I do understand, like, these are the things that he plans to put the trackable data, the measurable things is what, I don't expect 21 measurable reports because that's a waste of everyone, you know, of his resources. His time should be definitely better spent doing than providing the data. But it's all going to be kind of collective. If we're working towards the goals and you're presenting how you're keeping track of those goals, and yet we realize that, yes, there are other components that may not be as measurable or as much of a priority to measure, it still needs to encompass all of the focus indicators because there could be 6 that would be, you know, tied to one particular goal. There could be 3, there could be 20.
Jeff?
There is not one single goal and not one single indicator about the management of the budget. Nothing.
Jeff,
It's not there.
it's not, and we talked
And the
about
goals
this.
could be very successfully met, and the budget could be a mess. It wouldn't bleed into the achievement of these goals.
Oh, no.
Oh, when you have unlimited funds, you can do almost anything well,
We don't, though.
but you don't.
We don't.
But there's no indication in the goals that management of the budget matters.
We brought that up. We talked about that. We talked about having a goal around the budget. And you didn't want that.
Because it's not a goal specific to any one year. It's an ongoing responsibility of the superintendent. It has, and it will be every single year Dr. DeAndrea is with us, and he knows it. And that's why I didn't want it as a goal, because a goal is a very specific thing for a specific year. That's what makes it a goal.
So,
Let me just,
okay, go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
throwing it, I'm looking for some kind of compromise and consensus here. Or we could just vote. But if we added 2E, fiscal system, somehow, does that make any of this more palatable?
To where? To which goal?
All of them?
Well, it doesn't really, so,
All the ones that apply. Because obviously, I think like community engagement, like reaching the parents or things like that, or, you know.
I'm not sure which one we'd add it to.
Right, I think that was the dilemma.
I think definitely to the district improvement plan, goal 1. Because again, when you're looking at, adding, you know, modules or trainings or things like that, that is a budgetary item. That's something that would definitely have concerns where money would be being spent.
on the first goal,
On the first goal of the district improvement, goal 1, not student learning, because student learning looks like it's, where did that one go? I mean, that's more about identification of where we are curriculum-wise, and that one had, that's a 2-year plan, and there's multiple, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 already assigned to that one. But then you get to the district improvement one, and all there is one when it, for collaborate with, meet quarterly, you know, meeting dates, training modules, presentations for safety. If there's any materials or any upgrades that need to be done when you're coming into, you know, emergency management, I would think that a budgetary line item would make sense in that. I don't know if for the website one, for communications and community relations, if we're having to utilize new companies or using different servers or different things like that to up engagement, that might be something where there is a monetary amount or something that needs to be budgeted or grant that might be need to, so I would think it would probably go under that one as well. And as for school choice, it's going to be figuring out, like, that's budgetary because we pay tuitions out to other districts for students that leave the district. So that's a huge something where when they leave when they choose to leave our district to go to like Bourne or Upper Cape, or not Upper Cape, but Bourne or Carver or ORR, we're paying as a district for those students to go to those schools. So I would
But
think.
we don't have to educate them.
Right, I understand that, but we're trying to determine why they're leaving, so having that monetary piece as part of that goal, because obviously we want to retain our students in our district, one, because then we retain that tuition for our district, we're not paying it to another town. I think that's important as well, that we should be paying attention to that, because again, it's a 2-year plan, so it doesn't necessarily need to be like the first year, he's still figuring everything out. I do understand that this is still, he's getting his feet wet. He's figuring out where we are in the district. The first year as a new superintendent, I'm sure coming into what you come in is not easy by any task. And the fact that you have to answer to us and be held accountable to us and adapt to our personalities, adapt to what we've gone through as a district before you got here, and take these goals as it's a lot of observation on your part. So I do understand that, but I agree with Jeff that I think that our budget has always been our biggest thing. We have to present it to the town. We get denied a lot. We have to whittle. We have to get creative. And it really is hard. And I do think that if we have more comprehensive or more well-rounded things, it's going to be more transparent to the people that are watching. Because that's one of the things that one of the most tuned into, I think, meetings that we have is our superintendent evaluation, because the town wants to see who the person we pay the most in the district, how they're doing, how the superintendent is being evaluated by the school committee, and where that budget is going, and how everything has been managed for the year. So I think it is important to have a fuller picture of everything. And not anything against Dr. Danner, not thinking that he's not going to be able to make these rules or make these evaluations, but I do think that I think we would need to have the ability to use all of them.
I forgot what I was going to say. But I just want to add, I don't disagree that the budget is not important. In fact, you know, Jeff, that I think that the budget is very important. I do think that as a school committee, we have input into the budget during the budget development and the voting on the budget. So if we disagree on, I mean, we spend hours, right, listening to presentations on the budget in November. We will do that in a month. You know, we have input into it there. So I don't disagree that the budget is very important. I just don't see how these goals, they just don't lend themselves to that.
So did we have a motion in a second a while back?
Yes.
We did. So I'm going to call for a vote at this time on whether to accept focus indicators as currently constituted. So I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
No.
So 3-2. Correct? Brendan, you said aye? 3-2 it passes. It's a good discussion, and I understand. I understand.
I don't, actually, with total respect, I don't think you do. Because I am not going to be able to fulfill the responsibilities of a school committee member if I take this vote and only think about those focus indicators when evaluating the superintendent. I will have failed in my responsibilities as a school committee member. And so I can't. So I'm just saying right up front that with great respect to the rest of the members, I can't do it because there are so many other things on which I think, and by the way, they could be exemplary, okay? It doesn't mean they're going to be a negative for our superintendent, but they are part of his job, and I have to consider that when I'm doing his evaluation.
So you said you can't. Does that mean you won't? Or you?
I won't. I can't, because my ultimate responsibility is to the job that the voters elected me to do. Will I use the focus? Will I use the focus indicators to judge his success, relative success on the goals? Absolutely. Okay, but to me, that's all this vote means.
But the vote means that we've, as a committee, have agreed to use what Mask often recommends and what DESE allows us to do. So it's being done across the state by diligent school committees everywhere. We're being asked to do that.
And that's what I meant when I
As it
said
pertains to the goals.
It pertains to
DESE,
the whole evaluation.
I disagree. I don't think that's the interpretation we should be making, because there are elements of the DESE rubric that are clearly beyond the goals that are very important.
I don't disagree with that. I agree with that.
So I can't ignore them.
Dr. Swan.
Just to bring this up, our teachers are evaluated, right? They have a student goal and a professional goal that they create that's connected to the strategic plan or their school improvement plans, it's one of them, and then they have their other goals that they create. They're evaluated on those goals. Secondarily to that, underneath that is all of the indicators, as Jeff has stated, and the evaluators then narratively indicate the level of success on those indicators.
All 21?
On the rest of them. So,
Unless the union and the administration have agreed to use focus indicators, which many districts do.
what, some do.
Yeah.
But there is room in the system itself, and sometimes someone will say, I really want to focus on these things because I want to improve from the year before, and those are the things that are noted. But when I do a self-evaluation, I use every indicator when I'm reflecting back on where am I in the process. And I believe that the superintendent will do the same in his reflection back, that they're not ignored because they're there. It's just a way in which we can efficiently and effectively do this process in a way that we can move and have evidence to prove that we're moving. So I think it's not a bad idea, and it would be nice to do that for our teachers as well, if the union would agree to do that. But I do have to say that they are considered always as we're looking through them, and as we do our jobs. They're considered, not ignored.
So we have voted, it's done. It's 3-2. We are going to go forward with this for this year and see how it goes. Joyce?
I was just going to make a suggestion that we do have a superintendent evaluation committee, which Jeff and I are a part of.
Mm-hmm.
So those meetings will be fun. So I would only suggest that that's something we can discuss. We can talk about that. We can bring it back to the whole committee and see if,
I'm all in favor of that, if you guys want to
Jeff,
continue
so
the
we can-
discussion.
talk about how we could possibly
I can show you what we do.
augment, yeah. You okay with that?
Sure.
Okay, all right.
Okay. School committee report, policy review subcommittee report. April.
Okay, so our first meeting of the Policy Review Subcommittee will be next Wednesday, the 12th, at 5 o'clock. It will be via Zoom. I am still looking for a high school parent to join the subcommittee. So if anyone knows of a high school parent that would be available to join the committee, that would be great. The policies that are going to be on the agenda next week are student activity accounts, facilities and their governing use, empowered digital use, internet safety, social networking for staff, and collections and fundraising. So I will have an update on that after the committee at our next meeting
Thank you.
after.
Thanks. And so you said a high school parent.
The
we're still
high
looking
school
for.
parent
Okay.
is the only one that we still need to fill the rest of the committee.
Okay.
And we will have a total of 5 meetings, October, November, then January, February, and March. And then all policies for the year should be done by March, barring anything coming up that we may need to either extend or readdress.
Thank you. It's a healthy number of policies you're looking at.
Yeah, just.
Next up, another great non-controversial subject, school committee MCAS data requisition. So this was our opportunity to let Dr. Schwam and Dr. DeAndrea know what are the specific MCAS types of data that we would like to see at the presentation at our next school committee meeting on MCAS results. April.
I would like to know the MCAS alt information when presented. What are percentages per school and overall as a district?
Thank you. Anyone else with any specific MCAS request? Jeff.
And I had no idea, and I'm sorry I was late to the meeting, but I had no idea that the principals will all be frustrated with the level of absenteeism. And it's disturbing to me after 14 years on the school committee that despite the great work that is being done in the classroom by our teachers and our administration, that we haven't made more progress with a test that you could argue till the cows come home about the validity of MCAS, but if you have enough students and enough years, it has to mean something. And I am more than a little frustrated, and I share the frustration that absenteeism is such a huge problem. So I would like to see data, actual data, to see if we can show in a public way a correlation between absenteeism and success on the MCAS. In a perfect, and I'll be even more specific. If we had, with no names obviously, if we had every student in the district who took the MCAS as one column, and then the next column was the number of days of absence for any given year, and the next column was the MCAS result on ELA, math, and science. You, in a perfect world which doesn't exist, you would literally see, well, from the camera's perspective, you'd see a negative graph, a negative slope to the graph, okay? The higher the MCAS score, okay, the fewer the number of absences. Now, obviously, we're going to get some kind of scatter, but my guess is we're going to see a trend, a rather obvious trend. And I'd like to show that to parents and the public, because I don't want the story to be, oh, Wareham has terrible MCAS scores again, okay? Because that does not, in any way, shape, or form, give our staff and our administration the credit they deserve. Yes, am I saying to parents, get your kids to school? Yes, but I want to prove to them that it really does make a difference. Now, I realize I'm giving our administration some work to do. I'm hoping that it's literally data that can be aggregated and the graph presented. If it is a lot of work, then I withdraw the request.
I'll have it tomorrow, actually.
Tomorrow sounds really, really, really good, okay? Because I think, you know, when I've talked to educators about this, they say, of course you're going to see a relationship. It's intuitively obvious. Well, you know what? It's one thing to be intuitively obvious. It's another thing to prove it with data. And that's my goal, for the school committee to prove to the public that if you get your kids to school, our educators do a great job. So that's the end of my speech.
Thank you. Joyce?
And thank you, Andrea.
Sure, no problem.
I always like to see data from year to year. Now, I understand we've had a couple of off years, right? But not just year to year, but the same kids from year to year. I know that's something that you've been able to show us before. So I think maybe that's more valuable now.
I can tell you I have NUIA data connected to cohorts. So I have the MCAS and then the NUIA for the following grade. And then I have, it was hard because we didn't take a test in 20. We have a diagnostic in 21. So I went back to 18, 19, 22. So I had 3 years, and we thought it's a million slides that I have right now. So I'm trying to pare it down.
Well, we don't want a million slides.
Well, I'm trying, because you can't fit as much, you know what I mean? You can't fit a whole, there's only so much information you can fit. And so we sort of thought about it. We thought 1922 would be a good way to at least look at what we were when we were pre-pandemic, and then what it looks like
Post?
post.
So the results from last year?
They are diagnostic, and they're not, it was a very small amount of questions that they asked, and it's not indicative of the true MCAS. The last true MCAS was in 2019 and before. And when we attended a webinar, and basically Desi said the exact same thing. Like, you cannot possibly compare 21, and then we had nothing in 20. And so I had already done the comparison prior to the webinar, and I thought back, well, 19 was the year. So I don't think it really would mean as much if you're really looking to compare.
Okay.
So I can get back the 18 slides, but you've just raised the deck. The number of slides that you're going to see is huge.
Does the data analysis still exist?
Yes, but the last I looked, and I didn't look yesterday, but they hadn't quite, I had 21 data, but I didn't have 22 on the profile data.
Right.
But
Because I would like to see how we go against comparable demographic communities, that comparison.
That's easy.
Even if that's not done, maybe we know who those districts are based on last time, maybe?
Yes, they're listed, and I shared the most recent with Matt, and so I can definitely I was just hopeful that 22 would come up so that I could use that data.
And I'm just wondering out loud, should we see results by not pitting school against school, but by school or grade span? Is that the plan?
Grade. I have them for each grade.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Well, I guess that's what I'm talking about. So if this year's results for the 7th graders, if they took that test last year as 6th graders, is that valuable information?
No, and that's the problem, because the 21 test is not.
But next year and this year would be more valuable.
Correct. So they're basically saying to start over. This is your baseline.
Okay.
But for comparison purposes, because we wanted to see what effect did this have on us? Like, what happened? We really wanted to see what that looked like. The best comparison was from 2019.
Okay.
So,
and then the only other thing I did is I went back to your MCAS presentation last year, and one of the things that you talked about was identifying how to begin to solve deficiencies in math. So it was just be great to see what you did. Did it, how has that worked? If it isn't working, what else?
Yep.
Anyone else? Okay, hopefully that helps a little bit, gives you a little focus, a little more focus. Oh, no, I didn't mean that.
Really?
Too soon.
Yeah.
Do you want me to indicate the level of focus, or?
No, I'm moving on to the next agenda item. Number 13, any other business? Seeing none.
We skipped over protocol.
Oh, protocol we signed already. So that was, the protocol on the agenda is the list of guidelines we decided as a school committee. So we filled that out. Thank you. Any other business?
Hold on.
Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 500.